Great. Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting of January 23rd, 2014. Once again, we'll have David read us the agenda here, and we'll vote on that.
All right, the first thing I'll do is vote to approve or amend the agenda and add topics not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance, and then have public comment, and then review something put forth by the treasurer for internal borrowing. And then around 6:20, we'll start looking at the budget and the annual town meeting. And we'll have CM&D Director Ed Wagner, we'll have Fire Department, Fire Chief Tim Morrissey, and Chief Thompson from the Police Department all in to go through their budgets and talk about their capital articles.
Good. So we did have a draft agenda posted that included the planning board, but we're not going to have them tonight. So I think we'll amend that agenda to remove that. So are there any other amendments to the agenda, gentlemen? I'll take a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Terrific, thank you. Off we go. So are there any public comments? Yes, Elliot?
I'd like to know, what's the quickest, cheapest way to get to Miami?
I can't answer that, Elliot.
Greyhound.
That's right, one of those dollar, yeah. Solomon Street, Mike says, so I think that could get you closer. Yeah, extradition. Yeah, the police will take care of it. We'll give you a police escort down there. I might ride, though, with you. All right, so we'll just move along. We have a borrowing here from the treasurer, and I'd asked you guys to just double-check his numbers that we're using on this, and you connected with Pete, and he came back and said, explained what was what, so that's good to have that. One question I have, if we have the free cash number certified yet for 2013, because this goes back to 2012 free cash on this form.
Right. No, it's in DORs. They thought it was only going to be about 2 days before they turned it around.
Okay.
So we were supposed to have had it last week.
All right, but since we don't have it, we still go with the old information, the numbers that Pete had put forth on this form. Okay. So under this, I have a motion. I'll read the motion, and then I'll look for a second, and then any discussion. Otherwise, we'll vote on it. So I would move the approval of an advance of funds in lieu of borrowing totaling $30,000 dated January 23rd, 2014 for partial funding of Item 6 of Article 8 of the 2012 Annual Town Meeting, the renovation of elderly housing apartments. And I'll just describe it. This internal funding will provide funds for payments to be made on this project in advance of external borrowings, which will be done at a later date. Of the total appropriation, half of $500,000, approximately $250,000 has been previously borrowed. This $30,000 provides funding for the renovation of an additional unit expected to become vacant in February.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Great, and so we all sign that, or, yes, we all sign that. Send it over to you, Mike, for your signature.
And my understanding is this is just a convenience so the treasurer can pay this in advance of bundling a number of these kinds of expenses together the next time he goes out for financing, is that right?
That's correct, that's my understanding as well.
Right.
So that's fair.
They need the money now, so it's too small an amount to go out to bond by
So
itself.
it's moving it from one fund to another internally, basically. We have the cash. Great, so we have all of that with, all of this with that, David?
Yes.
Just throw that down. All right, so while we're at it, then perhaps we can do the warrant that's here. I'll just move that up, and then we'll get into our review of financial information, because I see some folks are trickling in that may find that part of the agenda interesting. So we do have a warrant number 30 in the amount of $815,782.40. I had a few questions that I'll get to you, David, later. They're just not, nothing to preclude pushing this through. It's just one, there is one item in there worth checking on, which was it was a repair of a snow blower for Pine Hill, charged to Pine Hill, but it was, I don't know that they have a snow blower. I imagine they do. But it wasn't it wasn't addressed to them, it was addressed to, Farm Street headquarters. So it's
okay.
just worth double checking,
Right,
because
right.
I've seen a couple of those in the
Yeah,
past
in the
where
wrong
we,
place.
by mistake, something comes in for Pine Hill that really belonged either to the region or across the river. So that was one thing. Otherwise, these are just informational things that I'd like to find out. And we'll do that.
And there were two items that we were looking at. One was a reimbursement request that I want to check into, and then another bill on the, it's a recycling bill,
Okay. Yeah.
too.
All right, so on this one, because it includes we had an issue last week about a tree, I'm just gonna, and I don't have a reconciliation of these out-of-district speds that I keep wanting, I just soon sit back on this one. I respect where we're going, I think the others should approve this, but I'm just kind of sticking to principle, so.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor? And I'm abstaining. Great. Okay. Cool, thank you. All right, so now we're on to the section about 2000, I had in here on our agenda, review of 2015 financial model draft and selectmen budgets in total, as well as review of financial report update for fiscal 2014 for the 6 months ended 12/31/13. They kind of go hand in hand, and I'm going to throw into the mix here just a brief discussion. We did get a draft of the annual report from the auditors, and I haven't reviewed it in great detail, but there were a couple of things that I hope you, David, you've been a finance director in Weston or something, so I'd be curious about every time I look at one of these, I find it very confusing. But what I do note is that as a surprise to me, our fund balances that measure important things, from what I can gather, have gone up quite a bit, and that's great, I just don't understand why. So
Right.
maybe we can put our heads together and get smarter
Yeah.
about that, and ultimately talk to the auditors. The other issue, last year I had raised a concern that our capitalization policy of the town is $10,000 and 5-year life, I think it is. And this report continues to reflect or disclose it's $5,000 and 2-year life. So I'd ask the auditors to be smart about that. I see some adjustment here, but it isn't reflected in the footnotes. It's just one of those things I went to look for. So hopefully we'll get that straightened out.
But before you leave that, I didn't bring my copy today because it wasn't on the agenda.
Right.
But I did read it, and if I could
Absolutely.
borrow yours for a
bet.
minute.
Yep.
I was most impressed with the fact that the town is improving
Right.
financially. Some of the things were, the total of assets exceeded liabilities by $28 million, a change of 1.2 million, almost 1.3 million in comparison to the prior year. That's 1.3 million to the good.
That's right.
At the close of the fiscal year, government funds reported combined ending balances of 9 million, about 9.5 million, a change of almost 3 million to the good compared to last year. And at the end of the current fiscal year, unassigned fund balances for the general fund was 2.5 million, a change of more than 500,000 in comparison to the prior years. Again, I'm not giving all the details here and all of the decimals down to the pennies, but as I read that, I thought this was a great tribute to all of our town employees, our advisory committee, the Board of Selectmen, everybody working together. The town is significantly in better shape, according to the auditors, than it was last year. So congratulations to all. I think it's worth noting.
That's right, great. And we'll get smarter about that, and then I hope we'll have the auditors in like we did last year, and it'll be
before they change their mind and
Exciting
say,
session.
oh, we forgot this $5 million we have to deduct.
That's right. We should offer popcorn or something when people attend that meeting. All right. So we don't yet have the review of the financial report for FY 2014. So for the first 6 months of the year. And of course, that's helpful in looking at some of these budgets here as we discussed last week. So I don't know what the status is of that with Ruth, David, if you have any sense of that.
You would, no, I don't have any sense.
Because what I'm looking for, you know,
Right.
what I'm looking for is this thing, right?
Yeah.
That we decided we would do quarterly. We were doing somewhat monthly, haphazardly monthly.
Ideally, that information should all be in the budget sheets when they go out. There would be like a year-to-date.
Yeah,
And we will change that for,
Yeah, for next year.
yeah.
But still, so I hope we can get this sooner than later. And this is the one that I keep saying, I think I'm up to 12 times now. There were some questions she was going to update for the final numbers and then get this up on the website. And
Yeah.
I keep asking for that, but, and will keep asking because I'm a pain in the neck. All right. So we can't really touch on that part of the agenda other than to hope that we get it sooner than later. So that leaves us with this financial model here, which shows advisory's guidelines, what the financial model would show, and that would show $150,000 surplus if everybody followed advisory's guidelines to the T. And then what we so far have for department requests that are in the big budget book, like what Paul has in front of him, all of those department requests so far yet to be vetted, part of what we're going to do tonight for 3 of the major budgets that fall under the Selectmen. But nonetheless, if you look at what the requests have been, and it's still, this is a preliminary draft, it's got a whole bunch of other stuff to clear up, but right now it shows a $25,000 surplus. And in years past, this thing has shown, about this point in time, $1 million deficit. So
Yeah, I remember those days.
a big piece of it, obviously, is the schools, and what I'm seeing, I don't know enough about it yet, but clearly, there's been a concerted effort by school administration and the leadership there to deal with out-of-district spending on SPED, bring students in-house and so forth, and I think we're seeing a reflection of that as well as some movements of students in that piece of the puzzle.
So when you say surplus, you're talking about
Right at the-
people have stuck to advisories.
No, even
recommendations.
absent sticking to advisory's recommendations. Take, for example, we're going to talk about the police in a little bit. What they've submitted and what we have in our budget books does not fall under advisory's guidelines. However, even though that, including that information in this, we're still showing an overall surplus of $25,000 on this model. Now, this model has room to move in terms of all sorts of things to talk about in it, in terms of vetting assumptions on state aid, what we're ultimately going to show for supplemental funding for snow and ice and things like that. There's nothing in there on that. There is a slug in there for police overtime. Again, this is for fiscal year, this current fiscal year, where the amounts of overtime are trending, and she projects out, the Ruth projects out greater than what's budgeted, and she put a slug in there for that. A slug in for legal, it's going to be in excess of what's budgeted. All those types of things which are voted on at town meeting as supplemental funding using free cash. She puts in projections for revenues like motor vehicle excise taxes and licenses and permits and other such things, and all of those there are risks and opportunities in each one of those projections. We haven't vetted them. I don't think, David, you yet sat down with Ruth on that, since we focus mostly on the budget part of the process. But as we get down to the wire, and advisory, certainly we'll be looking at that. Hopefully, we're using sound financial management that will also be reflected in next year's audit report showing continuing improvement, which, as Paul alluded to, we see now. So this is helpful to know the big picture problem or not that we're dealing with given what's been submitted. That's how I view having this model in front of us. And then that leads us to our portion of this model, which in the advisory guidelines, their guidelines were, for the selectmen's budget, 1.4% overall. And I think in the package, in the last page of the model stapled together, shows something like this. Yes, selectmen only, okay? Now, it doesn't have a total, but this, two things on this to comment, just in terms of what you're looking at. It doesn't show the totals of the columns. And the very far right column is the difference between what budget makers have put in versus advisory's recommendation, if you assume 1.4% overall. I think that's how I read this. Is that fair, David?
Yes.
And the total of that column, as it stands with what's in the budget books, is $147,000 greater than advisory's guidance.
So we just spend all the 25,000 plus?
That's one way to look at it, and some free, plus 125 grand of free cash, right?
Right.
So that's in there. But the other thing is that I'm not sure that this sheet represents the complete and accurate selectmen's budget listing, right? So for instance, elderly housing is, I didn't find in there.
Right.
And I think and you mentioned, you pointed out cemeteries in there, which
included.
shouldn't be in there. And there's a slug of 15,000, for example, for cemetery, of greater than advisory's guidelines, that's part of the 147 that I thought we were over. Well, 15 of it isn't ours,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah. You can also make the argument that farm pond and elderly housing should be looked at separately from the general fund items,
Absolutely, because those are paid for on,
self-funded as.
yeah, they're self-funded, basically. The other thing that I also wondered, David, and I don't know if you had a chance to look at, was whether, for example, in elderly housing, they show a charge for snow removal and CM&D services, and the question is whether Ed also has those same costs in his budget, if there's double counting.
Right. That, I need to wrap my head around that again. We
Yeah,
discussed that,
that's all
right?
Yeah, we discussed it
Yeah.
briefly, but
So
it's
the-
not a big number, but
Well, it's
Maybe
not like
effective.
it's, Woodhaven budgets the amount that's basically a payment in lieu of taxes that comes to the town. That's, and the way they calculate it is years ago, I guess, they came up with some sort of formula that
Yeah.
was equivalent to the services that CM&D provides to
Right.
Woodhaven.
But again,
So if it's-
we still have to wrap our heads around, because
But-
my point is that we vote on the elderly housing expense item,
Right.
which includes payment in lieu of taxes,
Right.
includes separate payment for CM&D services, that sort of thing. So
Right.
the question is whether we're doubling it up, and if we are, Ed, the best place to show Ed's costs would be in the elderly housing line item as opposed to in his budget. That's all. I'm looking for opportunities to make our
Shift,
problems go
right.
away.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I gather you yourself added up the last column, which is the delta between.
No, the schedule had a total on it, so I just, on
It's
the
not on.
online, it just wasn't printed out here for some
But
reason.
I have those
What-
totals for
What
you.
is the total, just so I can write it down? You said 145,000?
147,000, I didn't write down the exact number.
So we are over the number recommended by advisory by 147.
1,000 and some change,
The,
subject
Yeah.
to some accuracy to be done here.
yeah, I mean, since I
So what's the
think my numbers are more accurate
So let's
reflection
hear,
of the board
yeah,
of
you have the
Selectmen.
right number, I
Yeah.
think, so.
Do you-
Including you pulled out elderly housing and farm pond.
Right. Do you
over-
think it's a good time to distribute
Yes.
this to you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Does that have the total one?
Well, see, so now what we've done, where we're at is, we're using, and I'll be talking, and what I reviewed is what's in the budget packages. Now David's got some recommendations or thoughts on how to make how to comply with advisory's guideline.
So if you go to page 4, would it be okay if I read through this?
Absolutely.
And that
We
way
have-
that
we-
it's-
We have the time.
Okay. The guideline that was issued was a 1.4% bottom line increase. Salaries could be increased by 1%, and whatever the remaining amount is could go into expenses as long as the bottom line didn't exceed 1.4%. The town accountant issued this guidance to all departments. In addition to that guidance, I requested all departments under the Board of Selectmen to provide me with additional information, which was 3 separate budget levels and associated narrative explaining each level. The 3 levels requested were a 5% reduction from the FY14 appropriation, a level service budget, which is a budget that provides the same amount of services even if it results in a higher budget amount, and an enhanced budget request that identifies a wish list of items that would be helpful to run their department if they could request anything. I pulled together all departmental requests for departments under the Board of Selectmen. I reviewed the departmental budget requests that went to the town accountant to be incorporated into the town-wide model. And I also reviewed the supplemental information I requested specifically from departments under the Board of Selectmen. The budgets that are in your budget books are the budgets as submitted by the departments with no adjustments. Those are the budgets that have been incorporated into the town accountant's model. For my analysis, I separated out the budgets funded by the general fund and the non-general fund budgets, which include elder housing and farm pond. Focusing on the general fund budgets under the Board of Selectmen, here's how things developed. Advisory Committee guideline for FY15 allowed for an increase of $57,031 over the FY14 appropriation, which is a 1.4% bottom line increase. The departmental request for FY15 exceeded the FY14 appropriation by $184,582, which is a 4.5% increase. The departmental request for FY15 exceeded the advisory guideline by $127,551, which is 3.1% over the guideline. $127,551 is the amount that would need to be cut from the department budgets in order to meet the advisory guideline. So far, I've cut $88,278 out of the departmental requests, leaving about $40,000 more dollars that need to be eliminated in order to get to the advisory guideline. Tonight, we are looking at the budgets of the police department, fire department, community maintenance, and development. Adjustments that I've made to those budgets are as follows. Now, probably we should take each one of those up when we discuss their
Okay.
budget.
Have you discussed them with the chief?
Yes, I've met with them, and they are aware of the changes that I made, yes.
So,
They don't have this document.
okay, so, and what you'll describe to us is both the cuts of 88,000 that you've made and the additional 40,000 that you're looking for. Is that a fair way to put that?
The additional 40,000 is still being,
You're still working that up, okay. But also, I'll just say, that, and this is an exercise to reach advisory's guidelines to a T.
right,
And
right.
it's more than an exercise.
Right.
This is an effort to reach advisory's guidelines. But to the extent we think that X, Y, Z, is still a critical spend for the town
Right.
because the benefits outweigh the cost, then we have to, meet with advisory with weaponry.
Right. So basically, you had,
And support our cause. And
Basically-
we'll bring our police if we need it on their budget and so forth.
There's more of us than you.
True, true.
So David, one thing that intrigues me is you talked about a budget that represented a reduction and a level funded budget from last year.
right.
Do you have any kind of analysis of what would have resulted or what would result from those kinds of budgets? I mean, it was probably a good exercise for you, but it would be helpful to know what we're talking about if we really wanted to push costs down.
If you wanted to have a level
Yeah.
funded budget, not a level service budget.
You had a three-part,
Right.
trying to find it again, but you had a three-part
Yes.
discussion, right? So you talked about a
First
5%
paragraph.
reduction from the 14 appropriation
Right.
and a level service budget, even if it results in a higher budget amount.
Right.
And then you had a wish list one.
Right,
I mean,
right.
that's probably less valuable, but maybe more valuable in a long-term sense. But
Yeah.
in terms of the level service budget and in terms of the reduced budget. It'd be helpful to know what's in and out on.
Right,
those.
yeah, I'll pull those together and get those to you. I could put it all in one document so that you could see all what the reductions were. And so basically, what's in your book is the departmental request, and there are no increases in service. It's the increase in cost of delivering the same amount of services. So that's what is reflected in the book and in the model.
Level service, this is the level service budget.
Right. So what I have done is, I had that target of 1.4%, so I'm trying to get to that, and then to show what needed to come out to get to that point, and then we'll have to discuss on what things are palatable and which things aren't palatable.
Yeah, and you're talking of 127,000 in total versus the advisory guidelines,
Right.
which may encompass a whole, we're only talking about 3 budgets tonight. Yes, they're the biggest ones,
Right.
but you know, you may have other pieces,
Yeah.
small pieces
So,
here and there.
So I will, oh, go ahead.
Beyond our budgets, I mean, it looks like he's down to 40,000. But before we cut 40,000 from one of our budgets, it may well be that in a budget outside of those of the Board of Selectmen, that there may be significant savings, like maybe in health insurance, or
Right,
I'm just
right.
making things up. So if there, the 1.4% was distributed across the board, town-wide, all budgets. Do we have any sense how the rest of the town?
Well,
But we do
Well,
know
that's
that
in the
they were-
model.
They were only 40,000 over.
If you go to the next page on the document that I gave
That you handed
It
out.
shows a
Right.
25,000 surplus town-wide, right?
Another 41,761.
The top
That's in
section.
the cost piece, and then down here is the total. That's
Yeah,
right.
but if
That's the
we're talking
delta.
about the cost budgets.
That's
The
right.
top section of the model is just the departments.
Yeah.
So,
So there are some, Paul. So we see, for example, most of the schools have the negative brackets because there's some cost shifting between schools and SPAD to regular education and so forth.
on the last,
Because, I mean, Peter, when you got to that number of 24 before,
Down below
which
here.
looks so good, but that's based on $1 million more in taxes and $1 million more in capital
That's correct.
grants. So, I mean,
That's correct.
we got to 24 by raising another 2 million, or assuming we're gonna raise another 2 million.
new
But we're
growth-
raising our taxes under the, on a Proposition 2.5. That's right.
New growth, applying free
That's right.
cash to the tax rate.
Right, I mean, to me, that's important from the standpoint of the town's operations, but in terms of figuring out what we're doing to save costs and how well we're doing against last year, I think the cost lines are probably the more relevant ones.
Well, that's all the budget effort we're doing. So you're right. It's a $42,000 delta overall compared to advisory's guidelines.
That's right, that's compared to advisory's guidelines.
So,
then-
and that's including the fact that we have 127,000 overage in that pool. And in that 42,000, we represent 127,000, so there's other
That's
things
right.
offsetting it.
And that's 550,000 more than we spent, or than we allocated last year, appropriated last year.
I don't see that.
Well, our actual 2014 appropriations, 24,727.
Yeah,
And this year advisory is recommending
Yeah,
25,279, so
550.
550,000 more.
That's right. Which is about your 2.5% plus some growth.
Right.
That's right. That's right. So, yeah, there are opportunities in other budget makers, but we can't grab those opportunities unless we can argue
Right.
the value to the whole town.
So there was another page to the document that I sent you that just focuses on it from a percentage basis, right? There's a table that shows where we're at, what the increase for advisory. Excuse me?
The last page is yours?
Yeah,
Okay, good.
yeah. And it just shows the percentages of where the department requests came in and then where the changes that I have. If they were incorporated, we would be at about 2.4%. So that 40 or 41,000 that I would still need to pull out represents about cutting 1% more out of the budgets. Out of the selectmen budgets.
Yeah, yes, okay. All right, so we'll, again, I just want to emphasize, if there's something we feel strongly about, And because we feel strongly about it, we are unable to meet advisory's guidelines. We have to be quite compelling in the case we make.
Right.
For advisory, to gain their support and ensure they make a motion for the amounts we're
Right,
after at their public hearing as well as at town meeting.
right.
That's the ultimate end result of this effort.
Right, but that's why I was just adding this caution, that before we have a department head leaving here thinking that they're not gonna be able to operate next year because of $40,000, I'd rather hold that thought, then get a sense of, is there some money available in a non-selectmen's budget that might offset this before I do any harm to any of our departments,
Yeah.
just to get to a number.
That's right.
But again, I haven't heard what they have to say. Maybe they want to give us 40,000 back, and if that's the case in this.
Well, and again, keep in mind, there's the 88,000 that you're getting back in some fashion, or you're confident you're able to get back from what we're looking at. Yes?
Except for one of those items that I think is going
Yeah,
to be required discussion.
Yeah, okay. But the other part of it, Paul, along those same lines, we're showing a surplus of 25,000. The last several years, as long as I can remember being involved in this stuff, we've always had a deficit that had to be made up using free cash.
Yes.
But it's only
And-
surplus when you compare it to the maximum levy, right?
That's right, that's right.
So
Right.
only if we assume we're gonna raise taxes as much as we possibly can, do we have anything called a surplus. So I don't really see that as a surplus.
Well, I'm just using it, based on using the maximum levy, it's a surplus, okay? And in the past, based on using the maximum levy, we've tapped into free cash. Here, we're not showing that. And we're also showing a fairly healthy slug of free cash, yet to be certified, but almost soon. And so there's room to consider using the free cash for purchases of capital items and all that sort of stuff. And, I won't step on advisory's toes. Ben's here from advisory to pay attention to what we're doing and add value. If you want to speak up at any time, you get the mic, okay?
You could request that they put together a model specifically showing taking 2% of the levy instead of the full 2.5%.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think
Just for
any of those
comparison.
exercises are valuable if you have the time to do them.
I think you'll find some folks interested in that. Okay, well, I think I'm going to keep what you gave us, David, with that page open with the explanations of the 88 and the possible 40 handy as we get into the budgets, okay? And up first will be Ed Wagner with CM&D. Ed, we're going to put you onto the comfy seats up here. And
Do you want me to read that paragraph?
of what their changes are. How about if I go through what we've got here, and then we'll go to your paragraph?
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Sure.
And you can chime in anytime.
Maybe we should let the department head present his needs first before we say what we've done to it.
I'm happy to do that. Ed?
Let him have an opportunity to.
Good evening.
At least for a little while, I think he has that in his budget.
Yeah.
Swell.
Ed, I heard you spent 30 hours straight behind
Yes.
the wheel of a big rig the other night?
Yes, long night. But everything went well. We had a good handle on the storm throughout, minimal breakdowns, and the guys did a really good job.
Yeah, well, you and your guys were out there, I was sleeping. It was a beautiful thing. No, I appreciate the effort.
Tried to keep the
you
noise
guys
down
put in.
over there on
Yeah.
Whitney.
Yeah, thank you, Ed, and thank you to all the.
The
folks that
budget you have before you is a level funded budget.
Level service.
Level funded. The number in there, what we did last year, if you recall, we had a position of one of our employees retired. And what we did was we took his salary, which was approximately $45,000, and transferred it into operating. And what we did was we subcontracted out the lawn mowing.
Yeah.
And the purpose of that was by taking the 45,000 out of salary, putting 40,000 into operating, we were able to maintain the same service, give back to the town a healthcare benefit, retirement, not have to purchase capital lawnmowers, fuel used for the lawnmowers, and provide the same service. So this number is not reflected here, and it had to do with Ruth's note at the top there about the transfer, so it doesn't accurately reflect the level-funded budget.
Yeah, so, okay. If I could just interrupt briefly, because you've gone right to where I see that. You know, I look at the detailed page here, and I remember at the 11th hour of trying to get to using the least amount of free cash and finding money in the budgets, that you and David had come to that conclusion to not fill that position, or the guy was retiring, you had a vacant position that hadn't been filled in some time, and you were gonna outsource the mowing. And yet, when I look at the detail here of what we're provided, and which ties, the numbers tie to what everybody voted on at town meeting. I mean, the numbers that are reflected here tie to that, but what it doesn't show, and hence you show a big expense increase percentage of 40,000. What's missing is that 40,000
Coming out.
coming, I don't know if it came out or if it didn't reclass or what, but somehow or other, I'm still confused. I've been confused on this for some time now. And so anyway, I don't see the contractual services that we did reflected in the detail here. And I don't know what happened with that body that position that was eliminated, if that's a fair way to put it.
Yep.
So that's something just worth digging into, and maybe you already have, and we can talk about that.
No, I think it's something we continue to talk about and try to figure out.
Yeah.
You don't see the transfer because you see the salary going up and the expenses going down, is that the?
Well, if I look at this detailed page here, Mike,
Yeah,
there was a bunch of, under land management, general operations,
yeah.
we show the year before actual and budget, and for this year's budget, there's actuals 35,000 of contractual services.
Yeah.
And I expected some amount of 40,000 was
Back in,
reclassed out of
yeah.
payroll and put in there.
It's not
And
there.
it's not there, and I'm not sure what happened with the payroll position, whether that's still up in here? or
Exactly
whether
what
that-
transpired, I don't know.
Okay.
But
So
what I
that's-
do know is when I was given the spreadsheet and I started out preparing the budget, is I went through and level funded everything. There's
All right.
there's nothing there.
But how do we get to a budget request of 923,000 when last year it
Yeah,
was
that's- yeah, that's
880?
what I was trying to figure out.
Yeah, that's the challenge here.
Why is that level funding? That's a difference of 43,000.
If you go through line by line on every one of my line items, you will not see an increase from last year.
Well, then how do we end up, I mean, the actual
It
vote
has,
is-
it has to do with the way that they pulled the salary out and inserted it in. Ruth had a much more detailed explanation than I can give you.
So-
I don't quite understand it,
So,
but
other than salary and this question mark about what happened with this reclass to contracted outsourced services, you've level funded all the other stuff, is
Yes.
what you're saying.
Yes.
And so if we looked at the detail with that type of eye, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, the only
Other
difference
than
is the
salaries.
contractual services, the $40,000.
And the salaries.
And the salaries, the small amount.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
another small glitch.
But the amount that town meeting is going to be asked to appropriate under this scenario, if this was accepted, is 923,000. And the amount that they actually voted last year was 880.
Yeah.
That's,
The
That's-
reclassification was for 2013.
and that's what I've gone on, was that's what advisory is looked at, that's what accounting is
Yeah.
looked
Well,
at.
the
So that's what I've started
skilled
building
labor
on.
position still has that large increase in it, right?
Yeah.
Is that because you've got another position, or? That's not,
What
that's
we
not
did,
a-
what we did, just to, again, to kind of clarify and find out exactly where everything was going, was rather than lumping everyone into a skilled labor on, I believe it's page 2 of the Excel spreadsheet, we actually listed out each employee's name and accounted for them, and that's all that's there.
And I see it took it out of the equipment operator, so it ends up roughly
Yep.
being, yeah.
And actually, we're actually in less money because the equipment operator was the one who retired. His salary was higher than the skilled labor. I replaced the skilled labor, so you still have the delta between the skilled labor and the equipment operator, that money was given back also.
Yeah, well, here's
There's
what
something
I
fishy
fear,
here, yeah.
is that that something didn't mesh properly last year. When we were thinking we were removing a position and we were putting it into outsourcing. But we also had removed, my understanding is we removed 2 positions, because there was a last-minute $45,000 cut last year in the budgeting. And so, I don't know whether that got all screwed up, and
I don't-
I'm still confused on it.
There was
What we
one
did.
position that was being dropped, and one was
One
being
was
held
unfilled
open,
at
was
the moment.
unfilled. So there was supposed to be a shift that you would think there would be a $40,000 drop in salaries and a $40,000
That's right.
increase in
And I don't-
expenses. That is, I've never seen that, and I don't think Ed's ever seen that. So
Yeah.
we've continued to ask about it, but this is the number that ties out to the appropriations that I've
No, I
seen
understand.
everywhere.
So either we didn't eliminate we still need the contractual services, and either we thought we were eliminating a position that we didn't, or we're not showing it this year as being eliminated. And it was, and I'm sorry I'm using the word eliminated, it was unfilled.
Yes.
I don't think the transfer was ever, that would have to be proven to me, that the transfer ever made it into his budget and wasn't just completely
No,
reduced.
no, but if the transfer was done, then we're still dealing with a $40,000 overage in some, increase that needs explanation. Because,
Because right now, his budget's increasing by 4.85%,
yeah,
and yet you're saying it's level funded. And somehow, for me, 4.585 is not equal to 0. Just
So-
mathematically.
so I think, we're not gonna vote on, I don't think we're gonna vote on anything tonight, because we still don't have the full picture and we got things to do. But this clearly is something that we gotta get answers to, and maybe it is, we misunderstood the $45,000 reduction last year, and as a result, we're the real number, somehow clearly, somehow the number for the outsourcing isn't there. And if all the positions that the unfilled positions that we were eliminating got eliminated, then somehow that slipped through the cracks in accounting, in our conversations with accounting, or what. And it's not to look for
it
blame, it's just to
disappeared.
figure out what happened. Something-
Yeah, but it disappeared when we were, just before town meeting last year,
Yeah.
we were doing this shift, and also his budget was being hit to absorb as much of the snow and ice overage as possible. They were trying to tuck into the CM&D.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of adjustments going around, and I just have never been convinced that, while we, in our head, thought that there was a transfer, I don't think that there was ever a transfer of those dollars into expenses.
Yeah.
So what happened, so where'd that expense money come from this year?
Well, he has, so I
He
think
has-
where there was thought that there was a position being eliminated, it didn't.
Right.
It wasn't. And it wasn't there to be eliminated, is what I fear.
I'm pretty sure we had said I don't know if we said at a town meeting or just before, we told them we may be back by the end of this year because we don't see that the mowing contract is fully
Yeah.
going to last for the whole year.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, because we've got $635 appropriated for contractual services in fiscal 14. And if Ed's view is that he contracted for mowing services to the extent that someone in another position would have done that work, it's gonna be more than $630-something.
That's right. It was 40-something thousand.
Right, 40-something thousand, that's not in that budget.
That's right.
So-
No,
Well,
here's the 40,000 in.
Is it
Is
this
that
year?
five-
Is it
This year, but
15?
last
At
year wasn't
15,
there.
right, right.
is it
right,
15, but
right,
at
right.
14 he doesn't.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right, and so, you know, that was, one thing I asked about last week was if we could get a year-to-date on any of these, which I think would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you clearly used the mowing, so it's been going there.
Yep.
Into that line item. So our actuals are gonna wind up at 40-something thousand.
Yes.
40 over,
Yeah,
40 over last year's budget.
that's right. Yeah, our actuals will show a number there on that spot of 40-something thousand bucks.
Yeah,
But
just
which-
prior to town meeting, I believe it was
one.
David and I sat down and we had calculated out that we would run into a shortage in May and that they were gonna pick it up and address it then,
In May of this year.
of this year.
Who was going to address it?
David and myself are gonna
Yeah.
be bringing it forward.
We saw that the mowing contract wasn't going to be, the money wasn't going to be there to fully fund it for the entire year. And that we'd either have to go back for a supplemental or change the way that we're doing the mowing.
All right, so that's $40,000
Yeah, that's a
more.
$40,000 problem to figure out here.
But unfortunately, it's 40,000 the wrong way.
That's
And
right.
and it's in 14, which means it cuts into anything we might have this year.
That's right. We're gonna have you're gonna be over budget on that line item, maybe under budget on a bunch of others to cover it for this fiscal year. But we're still looking at nearly 5% increase, not a 1.4%
Well,
increase.
what he's saying is, if you add the 40,000 in May with, let's say, a transfer of $40,000, that's gonna bring up 2004 to equal what he's
I
asking
understand that,
for in
but I'm
215, and therefore,
skeptical-
it's a 0%
I'm skeptical that we're going to
increase.
find that $40,000.
Yeah, that's a supplemental funding.
I understand
possibility.
that's the only way you can get a level-funded budget.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look like level-funded on the spreadsheet.
No,
No.
no, and that's a $40,000 problem we have to deal with for meeting the guidelines here, so.
But it's actually a 2-year problem, because the guidelines must have been set with using 1.4% times a number without the 40,000. So now we're gonna add 40,000 to this year, 40,000 to next year.
Well, then you
That's
have a
both gonna
level-funded
be,
budget.
both years are gonna be in excess of 1.4%.
Well, next year won't be.
Yeah, so David,
Well, yeah, it
It
depends
was
on how you
figured,
look at it.
it was
yeah.
figured on
Right.
the $880,000 plus 1.4% rather than 920.
all right, so David has some solutions, at least to the tune of 16,000, I think is what you're talking about.
Right.
It's really a $30,000 problem if you used advisory's 1.4% guideline and applied it to
Right.
this budget.
The reductions I made in the budget were $16,683. That's a reduction of $13,233 in the salaries line due to a correction of the number of hours of the clerical assistance being provided to CM&D, and then reduced various expense lines, contractual services, cell phone budget, and dues and subscriptions for a total amount of $3,450.
So you can live with that, I think if I'm reading ahead here, you can live with just reducing this budget of 923,000 by roughly 17,000 bucks. And that will work within your overall scheme of 1.4%.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's plausible, I mean, that,
Yeah, I mean, I wonder, are there other ways, longer term, that you can cut costs, staffing costs? I mean, you just mentioned the snowstorm, 30 hours straight out in the snow, but, you know, if a snowstorm's at night, and you've got all your guys scheduled to work all day, and then they stay on and they have to plow all night, or you have to plow all night, I mean, is there a way to schedule folks so if you predict the storm at night, they don't report until 4 o'clock or whenever it's needed to actually do the storm work? And that way, you know, you don't have people out there 24 hours in a row, and the town's not paying time and a half.
In a perfect world without having to deal with the unions, yes. You could, but it'd be a union issue, number one. Most importantly is we need X number of guys, of crew members and trucks to handle the town at every given point in time. So by substituting one crew with another, you're still gonna have the same sort of cost
You mean for plowing
for
purposes?
plowing purposes.
Yeah, but you wouldn't have people who don't need to plow during the day doing other stuff on a day when the work that's needed to be done is the snowstorm that night?
We have 9 crew members, and the rest are contractors. The contractors are only called in when they're actually working, and then they're sent home. We don't pay their salaries. The regular crews would be here for their regular normal day. In order to swap them out for a regular shift onto an overtime shift would require negotiating, and
that's why I said it's a
that'd be
longer
very,
transition.
very difficult to get through.
Because, I mean, we've already got, this isn't even a big snow year, we've had a few snowstorms, and we're already, what, 10,000 behind?
But by design, we budget.
We only budget $82,000
I
for.
understand, and we
You
make it up.
make it up
in
the
years,
supplemental,
and-
yeah. I mean, we typically run twice that, I would say.
Speaking of the 10,000, you need to vote to.
Yes.
You know that.
Okay. We'll do that right now while we
So
think of
moved.
it. Yeah, second, all in
Authorize
favor?
deficit spending.
All right, great.
As far as snow costs go, I believe we're actually under according to our 5-year average.
Oh, that's good.
And you've had a bunch of little storms. You have some exposures. If you look at some of the detailed line items, I would argue you probably have exposures in gasoline, vehicle maintenance, catch basin remediation, and tree cutting, or whatever you call it. But you have cushions opportunities, if you will, and certainly in road materials, looking at historical actuals. So maybe they all net themselves out, but,
One
you know,
thing
if
to
you
point-
had real worries about any of those types of things, I'd love to.
The tree was
Share
a
them.
very large number last year. We dealt with the hurricane. We also dealt with the early snow ice storm, and a lot of that money was reimbursed from FEMA. And that doesn't reflect in my budget, but the town did get the money back for that. But I did have to incur the initial cost.
Well, would you say, let me ask you this, the building, to me, seems new, but it's not so new anymore, and therefore, would you say that the budgets reflect the fact that things that were under warranty, which are no longer under warranty, things that are wearing out in the building, all that kind of stuff is captured in this budget overall? in some fashion?
Actually, none of that is captured in my budget. All of that gets captured through the building budget with Selectmen.
Okay, I'll save that question for another time then, but hopefully you've
yeah,
provided input to your needs to
Yeah.
that budget effort.
Overall, we've had this discussion a number of times that a number of the town buildings are going to need, some proactive work, and it is going to require more funding. And
Yeah.
I would support that.
Okay. All right, so we have some digging to do. It looks like, are you comfortable with the changes that David
Yes.
has put forth so that you get your nut down a bit, and that will seem to work within the whole scheme, unless we're still chasing 40,000?
Yeah, that would be the,
So,
It would be great if it could be back in there, but, everything, that appropriation number is reported everywhere, Department of Revenue, everywhere. So I just think that it was.
well, I guess the message is to think long and hard about your real needs, to be sure you voice them. That doesn't mean you get anywhere, but it's better to know about them than not know about them, so that we can be prudent and not penny wise, right? And the other thing is, we do have to figure this out. I think I even asked a couple of times now, on the thing I keep asking about a dozen times, is make sure we're good, because I'm confused about what we did on this contract and personnel thing. All right, any other questions on this budget? Because I think we're going to talk about capital items here while we're at it.
Yeah, I mean, and this is more of a general question, and maybe, as the new guy, answer my question, but I'm looking at some of these line items where you've got, let me just to use an example, road materials for highways, roads, and streets, and 60,000 is requested this year, it was appropriated last year, it was appropriated the year before, and we've never spent anything close to that. And then you go to the next page, highway, snow and ice, road materials, and where we've appropriated 26,750, and 3 of the last 4 years, we've spent 68, 79, and 86,000. So you've got two completely mismatched line items for the same, I assume there's a transfer at some point in the year, but why don't we just,
They won't
Budgeted-
transfer from the snow and ice.
so why do we do the budgets this way then?
Snow and ice is always I mean, it would be great if snow and ice was just completely out of there, budgeted as its own department outside of
The snow and ice
CM&D.
department.
Yeah, the snow and ice department.
Deficit spending, snow and ice.
Anything we do with the snow and ice comes out of the snow and ice budget, whether it be the road salt, sand.
No, understood, but we put a
repairs.
number in this budget, it looks
The
like,
road-
every year,
the
that's
road-
not nearly enough
Oh,
for
yeah.
what you need.
Yes.
Right, so
And-
towards,
And we put a number in the road materials
The-
budget, that's twice as much as you need every year.
No, the
Okay.
the road materials we utilize for road repairs, berms, catch basins, repairing
Sidewalks.
them there, sidewalks. It typically, each spring, the word comes down where they're looking for the extra money for our snow budget, and I put a freeze on. And that money is frozen by the town accountant, and then that money is then taken and transferred into my deficit for snow and ice. I never get a chance to utilize it. Do I need it? Yes.
The road materials budget, you don't get a chance to use because
Yes.
it's transferred. So
Yes.
that, I mean, that's my point. So why are we budgeting it that way instead of budgeting it the way it's actually spent?
Point is I do need it.
Because you'd rather have it, but you never get it, it looks
I
like.
never get it. I do need it.
Yeah.
A lot of things are getting rid of street sweepings, ends up going on hold. So you end up with a pile at $30 a ton that just keeps growing that you can't get rid of. I end up with a number of guardrail issues that I can't get to fund them. And all that money gets transferred over to
So
snow
we've
and
got
ice.
basically, just in that one line item we just talked about, we've got a $30,000 a year deferred maintenance problem that, over time, at some point, we're gonna have to spend. We're gonna have to address.
And the reason you're not getting to it,
Because of the money.
manpower.
It's gotta be transferred to snow and ice.
to me, towards the end of the year, what they do is they
Not
start,
to snow and ice. It's getting transferred to snow and ice instead of being applied to the things he needs.
but they look for other areas in his budget that were, he has a plan to spend that money on something else, and then snow and ice eats it up. They try to ding his budget as much as possible and to bring it in right at the level, and then whatever's remaining outside of that, that's the overage that they'll bring back to try to
So like I
clean
said,
up.
I'm the new guy coming in looking at
Right.
this. It doesn't make any sense. It
No.
may be the way it's done every
No,
year.
I'm with you. I guess I didn't appreciate what you're describing, because I remember seeing it last year. We had some transfer from your general operations to snow and ice. And I don't sign up with that.
Once this snow and ice budget, however it's in here, once they hit that, they've
We're
charged enough to
deficit
it,
spending.
they should be deficit spending somewhere else. in
No,
a
but we're
side.
deficit spending through the supplemental, yes, or because.
Right, exactly.
Right?
It should
So why
all
would we
be.
be tapping into this budget?
The 60,000
on
that
Yeah.
he says he needs
Yeah, I'm with
because
you
he's
on that.
deferring the maintenance.
With you on that.
Because it's common everywhere, they try to ding the budget that it's coming from first before they hit the supplemental.
There's two separate issues here. The first is, why is snow and ice funded this way? And it's funded this way, by this way I mean with a low amount, which is later supplemented by transferring funds in, is because there's a separate statutory scheme for snow and ice. There's a separate statutory scheme because you don't know what that amount is going to be. There often is reimbursement from the federal government or the state government, and so communities traditionally budget a number and then see what happens. Then they try and get as much reimbursement back in as they can, and then left with a net number, which then requires a transfer in. So that's why snow and ice is handled differently.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good
The
with that.
statute allows us to deficit spend in that
But
category.
we're paying
Because
for it
we're-
when we go over, we're paying for it with guardrails and with.
No, that's a
with other
decision that's made locally here, primarily
Well,
by
we're the people who
advisory.
are locally here, so we're the ones who are doing it.
How you get there, many communities just transfer from free cash to pay that. Because free cash is revenue that was generated, and the revenue that was generated is in part because you didn't appropriate it to the DPW department. So you have more revenue coming in than you had budgeted to spend, so that's your free cash, you use it to pay for snow and ice. You can get it from other sources, but apparently Dave is saying that we have specifically gone into the CM&D budget and cleaned out the accounts that he's got used to be used for other purposes.
Right, that's
And
where I
that
was
may
5
be-
minutes ago.
that
That's what
may
I'm
be
saying.
a
That's not a
judgment.
great idea.
That may be a judgment that we need to revisit going forward, that shouldn't be done.
When we discussed this with advisory, the morning meeting before town meeting last year, I think some of them said, I didn't realize that's what we do.
But we just
And
put it in
neither
this
did I,
budget
and I
again.
was on advisory for
Yeah.
some years.
So you do have other items. He does do without doing some of the things that he planned to do in order to pay for that.
It just seems funny that we wouldn't take an accurate look at what he needs and what he spends when we make the budget. We're just carrying a number over year after year after year that isn't actually used in the way it's entered into the budget. I mean, I just picked that one because it kind of jumps off the page. I don't know if there's
Right.
other ones
No,
that are like that
If he has a
too.
need for guardrails and things like that, that should be a budget item.
It is.
And that
It's road
shouldn't be-
materials. It's a budget item that he doesn't get to spend every year, he
Road
said.
materials is not guardrails.
Well, he just said
is
it was.
I don't think
Materials
so. I
and
think that's
supplies.
sand and salt.
I'm going by what the superintendent said. Just,
We utilize that line item for a number of different things. It's utilized for,
But
it's, without diving into it too much, it's our go-to line item. And,
Well, so you have, I think you've heard at least from two of us, and I think three of us are saying, we'd rather see you do what you gotta do
and
and
speaking
not
with,
do it and use those funds for snow and ice, because the funds for snow and ice can come from the free cash
in
and
the morning, as
supplemental.
David referred to, the morning of town meeting last year, he believed he had turned some heads and we were gonna make some serious headway this year going forward, that this was not gonna happen in the future, which
Yeah,
I'm
so-
looking forward
And
to.
I think we both understand it better now that we can keep a watch.
so
you
that's
have-
the understanding now, then you keep that number in, and we hope that next year, when you show up here, it says, 56,980 in that number instead of 30,000, right?
Yeah, and the work's been done. Good
Yeah,
catch. See,
okay.
that's great. That's the new guy,
Yeah.
seeing a fresh look here. I love it.
Okay.
I love it. All right, let's go to capital then. Anything else in your budget? I think we're good, right? Guys, might be a little longer night. Is that all right? Yeah. All right, appreciate it. Sorry. Oh, you guys have the big,
Now we're getting pictures.
all right, good. All right, so what are we talking about, Ed? This is a
This is one of our snow fighters.
snow fighter dump truck.
We utilize this for all snowstorms, and we also utilize it for hauling hot top road repairs.
Yep.
It's a 1999 Mack truck, and it's coming to the end of its life cycle.
Do you know how many,
6,000 hours.
6,000 hours on the engine? Okay, like this. Car when you go. 6,000 hours, okay.
You can see in
And
the
a fair
num-
amount of road miles, I'm sure, as well, right?
Yeah, the engine hours more accurately reflect
Understood.
the mileage
Yeah.
and wear and tear.
Yeah.
You can see from the second picture there, the body is beginning to rot in a number of places.
Yep.
And on the third picture there, what that is that's the frame rail with the body lifted up. And if you can see that lower frame rail there,
It's rusty.
you can just see how it's kind of separating. See how it's not an even line across? What that is a double frame rail, and what that is, the rust has gotten in there where it starts to separate. And that's an indication that the frame is going to be on its out.
Yep.
And once that happens, this vehicle will not pass inspection.
Right. How many of these do we have?
We have 4 bigger ones and 1 smaller one.
This is a big one?
This is one of the bigger ones.
This is one of the big,
Yep.
one small one. And so when you have a snowstorm, these guys are,
These are our front
Hard at
line,
it,
front
right?
line main sanding pieces. These are the first ones out.
okay.
With any snowstorm, we usually roll all 5 of these out for sanding prior to the storm, and then they're utilized throughout the storm.
And they're plowing at the same time or as well. And and these, otherwise you're using outsourced people to do the roads.
These are used in
Contractors.
conjunction with our contractors.
Yeah, so you
Yes.
have contractors going and so forth, but do some of our contractors have big rigs of this size?
They do. If I can pick up where you're going, is why would I pick up a truck like this and not just outsource it? What we try to do is find the fine line between having our own crews and an outsourced crew. Because the difference between the contracted crew and our crews is when something breaks, they just go home. We need to get these vehicles back out on the road and operating. That's where I need them. And with a contracted service, you never know who's going to walk through the door. I can't dictate to them that they're going to have a heavy plow, big sander. I have to take what comes to me. And you're really rolling the dice on who you're going to get.
Okay. All right.
Is this number, current number, it says at the top, pricing valid through October 30, 2012, current contract available on request. At the top of this page.
Oh, yes,
But it's also got a January 9th, 2014 date on it, so
yes.
it's just their old form? Okay.
Yeah.
Bless you.
Bless you.
That's a big bad boy, isn't it? All right, well, do you have, I think you used to have, and you probably still do, your total equipment picture
Yes, 10-year plan.
shows mileage and whatever information you have on it.
Yep.
You know, the equipment, the age of it, that would be good to get.
Sure, I can get you an updated copy.
And have that. Remember, we had a question about insurance coverages. There was that list we saw of some were at actual cash value, some were replacement value or something. And it was also to make sure I'm sure everything's covered, but there was a full, complete list from the insurance guys, and just to make sure all of these are covered. But
Each year when you reconcile that each year
Yes.
you do?
against the
Okay.
insurance.
Okay, yeah. You know, it's just
I
one of
believe it
those
was the
things
first
that-
year I was here when we were reconciling it, we came up and noticed that we had minimal coverage on the bigger pieces, and we swapped it over to the actual cash value.
Yeah.
That way, when one of these should be totaled, I'm not getting replaced
All right.
with a Toyota.
What would be the trade-in value of the existing vehicle?
The last one that we traded in, I believe we got like $8,500. This one I would anticipate being a little bit north of that.
10 grand? 9?
I'd be hoping for 13, 14.
So we could take, if the estimate is 173, we could do with
161.
159,000.
Can you apply, this, oh, I'm sorry, this wouldn't, that would be through an auction. It would be a trade-in.
Oh.
These dealers do not take trade-ins.
And so that just comes in as a, the general fund. free
We'd have to
cash.
come back into the general fund and.
Yeah. So you still gotta go with the right number probably in this situation, right? All right. Yeah, seeing that full schedule would be helpful on that. Any other questions on this piece of equipment,
The only
James?
question I had, and I don't know, it may be the case, but you talked about problems with the frame and I guess some of the mechanicals. Is there anything on your current truck? Are any of these options things that you can move from the truck to a new truck, or it doesn't make sense to do that?
No. You could pull a sander control out of it, but then that's just gonna lower your trade value or auction value for the vehicle.
Okay.
We could strip it, but there's really not much to strip out of these.
The spare wheel and all that stuff is not stuff that's
No.
transferable.
No. You end up with is, they'll change the rims, the offsets on them and everything.
Yeah, it's a different model, I get it. Yeah.
All right. And then you got some fuel management system, Ed? 21,000? If that's the right amount? And that's, I think,
This
you know,
is
if
the-
somebody were to ask you, how are we doing on fuel this year, or whatever, how much fuel do we use in a month or something?
We're
Can you provide that information?
could
Not
have
that I really want to know, but with the current system.
I could this morning, but I don't have those numbers in front of me.
Well, what I'm trying to get to is why you need this.
Why I need this?
What is it, and why you need it?
This has nothing to do with how much fuel we use or mileage or anything like that. The tank at the yard we have an above-ground tank, a gas pump, And on top of that gas pump is a system where if CM&D, police, fire, they all have a unique key. They put the key in, and identifies to the system what vehicle, how many gallons, what type of fuel, and then what it does, it ships that over to my computer where I can keep track of what each vehicle's using and the date and time that they're filling up. The problem with this system is, and I can't even get an accurate count of how old it is. I'm told it was there from the onset of when the tank was installed. It runs on DOS. It's an antiquated system. It fails approximately 4 times a year. This year alone, it's failed 3 times. Each time that the gentleman comes in, it typically ends up being a motherboard issue. We're going to spend $1,200 to have it repaired. In the interim of when it's down, not only do I lose all the data for accounting, but police end up having to fuel up at a local station because it's inoperable.
So you need it just to get the fuel out of the tank?
Needed to get it out and account for it.
And will there be maintenance costs or service costs on
Simply a
this or something?
communication to say what vehicle's fueling up and how much is it using, when is it using.
Okay. All right. Any questions on that, James? All right.
You could hire a kid to do that for less than $21,000.
That's creative thinking. Yeah. Well, it begs the argument of why even do our own fuel?
A lot of towns do sub it out. There's in another town, several towns that I know, they use a right card. And what that allows you to do is fill up at certain participating dealers. Currently, the downtown dealer, I don't believe they participate in that program, and we would end up having to go over to Framingham, Natick to fuel up. Do you want to spend the expense? Exactly.
Are we
So-
exempt from the taxes?
We're exempt from the state tax, but not the federal tax, I believe. There is one tax that we do pay, but it's not the state.
Maybe that we're exempt from the federal tax grounds that the 50 states are free from federal taxation. And so you don't want to fill up at a local gas station because you end up paying
Yeah.
the premium of taxes. And the taxes are quite substantial. Federal taxes are pretty substantial.
Yeah, we get approximately, I think it's 20 cents off a gallon that we lose in taxes that we don't have to pay.
Gotcha. Good. Anything else? No? Thank you, Ed.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ed.
Appreciate it. So next up, we have Chief Tim Morrissey. Thank you for waiting. Thanks to the policemen for waiting. Oh, and you brought a friend with you.
I brought
A familiar face.
Always Neil, who said he was never going to be here after.
Yeah, I thought we got rid of him. What's he doing here?
back.
Oh,
Don't let
man.
him go, don't let him go.
Brought the reinforcements.
So we're
Not
going to
the
talk
expert.
budget and truck. How's that sound?
Good.
And you got Neil, who's never failed to sell a truck, I tell you. Great.
He doesn't want
Well, we're not going to let him talk, though.
Yeah. Just here for support.
So, Tim,
Sign language.
Sign language like that
tell us
guy
about
at,
your budget. Maybe even before that, can you give us the Cliff Notes version? I read today an annual report or something that you would file that will go, I guess that's the draft of what's going into the town's annual report? Is
Right,
that
I
what
didn't
it
bring a
was?
copy with me,
Oh,
so
all right,
I
yeah. Well,
don't have it with
any
me.
highlights, just while you got the mic and the camera and whatever?
Well, as you well know, we've had a successful 6 months, or it's coming up on 6 months, with a grant that I was able to bring in for some extra money to the town. Worked very hard with Chief McPherson, Chief Dowes, just to get to know the community and everything.
Yeah.
Been working very hard with the other departments, Council on Aging, getting out into the community, doing some home inspections, trying to get kind of inter-community networking with the people from different departments so that They know that now there's a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, 8 to 6 person that they can get a hold of for any questions, concerns. And it seems to be paying off because I've been getting a lot of phone calls for little service things. My smoke detector's beeping. I've got this weird smell, but it's not smoke or something. Could you come over and check on it? Beyond the 11 o'clock hour when the administrative assistant leaves. So the word's getting out that I'm available. Getting a lot of handshakes and, oh, you know, it's good to see you type of thing from people. We're really glad you're here. So,
And you're also doing inspections,
yes.
so the implementation of your position is as,
It's been very beneficial to the town.
Right.
You know, where in the past, to do inspections, we had one of our members who's handling the inspections, getting a hourly rate to go and do that.
Yeah.
Me being able to do that kind of lessens that, so the revenue generated is pretty much 100%, not split up.
Yeah.
I still have left that a little bit in my budget, obviously, in a small amount for when I'm on vacation or, you know, not available, but
Yeah.
for the most part, that hasn't been necessary.
well, why don't you give us the highlights of your budget and to the extent, because you're you're looking at this all new, you're a fresh set of eyes at this.
Just like Mike,
Exactly.
the two of us.
You know, any input or questions or concerns or opportunities you see, whatever, we'd love to hear those.
As I noted, and you can notice, right, it's a fairly simple budget.
Yeah,
Not too complex, pretty straightforward. Salaries were taken care of even when I received it. 1% was added to it. I didn't touch that. I didn't go there.
yeah,
So really, we're talking only about expenses.
yeah,
And when we take a look at, down at the bottom, when do the math David and I looked at, it says it's a 2.25% increase.
yeah,
So it is above the 1.4. But as we kind of went through it, one of my major expenses coming up for next year that I had no control over and happened before I got here is our dues for District 14 membership. District 14 is the neighboring fire departments, communities in the Middlesex County region that we belong to. By belonging to them and paying dues to them, it offers us mutual aid assistance, especially in a larger incident. They can bring forth very quickly dispatching. They bring forth command vehicles. They can bring forth the dive team if we needed them, technical rescue. So we have a lot of outside expertise that we can bring into this community by belonging there. They doubled it from 1,200 to 2,400. I think that was my first meeting I went to in September, and I got that message. So having a small expense budget of less than $100,000, that ate up quite a bit of my $5,000 that I had to play with
yeah,
pretty quickly.
yeah,
Secondly was computer maintenance.
yeah,
We just started with that, as you can see, in fiscal year 2013, and $7,500 was put into it as a starter. There's no historical data whatsoever to that, and really, we don't have any yet. We started with the new software system that we utilize with the police department for our dispatching, for our records management. This is just beginning the first full year of using that. So as I have it now for that, I have on my side, not the police department side, but my side for user support, licensing fees and everything, coming up on $8,800 for the next fiscal year. So when I put in for $11,000 in computer maintenance, it's really mostly just paying somebody else, the company that manages our system and everything, to have that in their support 24/7, 365. Very little left over for maintaining a computer or two. Really, there's no money in it to go and buy a new computer. So it's not $11,000 to go buy new computers and everything, or to maintain
it's
it.
software service and
Software
support.
services, and that's what we use now to day in, day out to do it.
Yep.
I think this new software is going to be very beneficial because, as I mentioned in the annual report, I touched on, we have every address in the community into it. And those addresses that we're finding that haven't been added into it, that we haven't gotten through the assessor's office, we manually do, especially when I do inspections. I get their name, address, phone number, any issues or concerns, their alarm system, and we can put all that in, so both Chief Thompson and his officers have that at their fingertips in the cruisers.
Yep.
The dispatcher has it, so we know exactly which house we're going to. We have GIS pictures, Google Earth. We know, I put it in anybody's address, the firehouse's address, we get a picture.
Gotcha.
The rest of it is, $100 here, $500
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
EMS supplies, the cost of, putting new batteries in AEDs, bandages, et cetera.
Do you have
Really
any
nothing.
concerns about the fuel or the maintenance?
Maintenance is
budget
maintenance,
items?
is again, as we're gonna talk about in a couple minutes with
Yeah.
the ladder truck and
Right.
everything, the Quint. The longer the truck or vehicle is,
But if
fire
you,
department,
so,
CMD, it gets
so would you
expensive.
say your maintenance budget item that you're asking for while trying to meet advisory guidelines
Mhm.
assumes that you don't have a lot of maintenance on any of the equipment above and beyond?
We've been lucky in looking at historical data and everything, keeping it around $14,000 for the
Yeah.
past few years. We've been able to use that 14,000, but
Yeah.
completely, but being able to maintain it.
Yeah.
Tires, as you saw, we're already using, we only have enough money for one set of tires. Often that sometimes rolls into the vehicle maintenance when we need a full set of tires.
Gotcha. So did anything jump out at you that you wish you could add a line item for something or other, or really goose it up?
Well,
On any of these, you know?
I always, training is one big one. The
Yeah.
more money we have in training means we can also get some outside instructors. We can pay for some additional time and materials and make things a little bit more realistic.
Well, you only
It gets
have-
us access to somebody, and also on our EMS side, that we can get people out of Boston or whatever to
So-
come in.
So David earlier talked about, he's asked people for their wish list. That would be on your wish list?
It was.
Understood.
Yep.
Okay, that'll be interesting from the new guy's vantage point to know that. On the front page of this budget packet, there's the revenue stuff down here below, particularly the ambulance fees, and we're bringing in 125 grand or something into the revenue stream that's used in the model that does the whole thing. One could argue that maybe there's more. I know before your time, we all approved higher rates of fees and so forth, and we'll see more and more of that reflected in this line item of revenue and activity here. But nothing jumps out that we're building an account that we could otherwise use and take into
Right.
pay the bills.
One thing I was mentioning with Chief McPherson, and it seems that with the economy picking back up again and a number of homes selling in town here, we've done well in the past 6 months since the fiscal year began in generating
Inspections and stuff.
inspections and such. They've gone up and we've generated revenue.
Yeah.
For fiscal year 13, the previous year, the department brought in between grants and inspections and fees about 17,500. Already at this year, with the grants and with the fees and everything, we're up over 18,000, and we still have 6 months to go, and we haven't even included the burn permits that we just started issuing
Oh, yeah.
a
Yeah,
couple
yeah.
of weeks ago. So now it'll be running until May.
Yep.
So that, as you well know, also is a sizable amount of money that will come back to the town.
On your ambulance fees, I know those are net numbers in there.
Mm-hmm.
Any upticks in collection losses or whatever problems that jump out at you?
I mean, we have the normal amount of unpaid bills, and we do look for easy solutions that are not intrusive on the
Understood.
taxpayer of the community. Having said that, though, through December of the year, for the last year, we were up around $140,000 in total cash
Collection,
generated.
Net cash generated.
Right,
yeah.
net cash, not outstanding,
Yeah.
not combined revenue generated. So it has been good, and we came up with an average earlier over the past few years, I think.
Yeah, okay, no, I just
But we've been
wondered.
doing well, and it seems to be
Nothing jumps out on-
staying. Nothing, no.
Jumps out.
Can I just make a comment? So over the years, we've talked about, again, the amount of money taken out of the ambulance fund. And remember, we've had numerous conversations
Yeah.
about what the ambulance fund was originally designed for. That was originally designed for saving money to purchase a new ambulance. So I would just point out that if you look
Oh.
at the amount of money in the current account, even if you take out 125, over the past 12 months, for just calendar year 2013, the revenue was $138,000. So yours taking out 125, I think approximately right now, but I would point out there's still a good
There's
sizable amount of
$145,000
money
balance
that
there.
was still in that account.
Yeah.
That you need to be careful, you don't want to pull out too much each year, but still, if you have $60,000 and the town has decided that we're moving away from the place where we're going to use the ambulance revolving account for the purchase of an ambulance, because last time, remember, we put out a warrant article, it was a
Yeah.
capital purchase.
Yeah.
And one could suggest that you might be able to take some of that outstanding money and better manage that money, or invest that money, or utilize that money, because today it's not being utilized effectively.
It's just sitting there,
It
yeah.
just sits there in this account, and we're
Yeah.
not doing anything
Yeah.
with it.
So
So a
that's-
decision you may
that's-
want to consider.
I agree, I think that's a great point.
Explain to me the financial clerk position. What do they do?
The billing company?
Is that, it says financial clerk. Is that the billing company?
No, that's a person.
That's
Yes.
the admin assistant.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's my assistant.
That's your
My
assistant.
administrative assistant.
So it's more than just financial clerk, it's other stuff.
It's managing the incoming inspection requests, it's managing the day-to-day payroll for our 40-plus member
Which is
department.
very complicated, I will
It's
say.
as you well know, to meet the FLSA issues of the past and everything, we have a creative payroll schedule. It's very time-consuming. She's 19 hours a week, no benefits, no holidays, anything like
That was the
that.
question I was getting
Yeah.
at, was whether that's something we can consolidate with other financial.
And she's a member of the department, so she
But if
knows
they're
it
doing- if they're doing other
intimately.
stuff,
Yeah.
then probably not.
No.
And
No.
if you go over 20 hours, you have to
You do
provide
benefits.
health insurance and pension benefits. So you're better off with two people at 19 hours than one person at 40 hours.
We have tried to,
As long as they're busy the whole time, sure.
we
She's
did
more
talk
than
a little
busy.
bit about
Sounds like it.
whether that position could be combined into an existing already 20-plus hour position. And then, so I think we
That was my
briefly talked
question,
about
really.
that, but it's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the uniqueness of the position really requires
You know,
her
if
to
you
be
had,
in
if you were
station.
putting in 21 hours and it was a benefited position, I think the discussion would be more urgent.
True.
Yeah, it's still
Sure.
$20,000 a year, so.
That's right. That's right. Great,
You're on a payroll of
all right.
200 something.
Any other questions on the budget here? Because otherwise we'll get into the,
No.
Well, there was recommendations from
oh, yeah.
David
Oh, yeah.
with some cuts. Have you seen those cuts in your?
Yeah, we discussed them last week.
Yeah, and I think that I had a high sense that these were doable, but I made a reduction of the salaries line of $850, which eliminates the separate funding of a fire inspector, since those duties will be completed by the chief, and if a backup is needed, that cost would be absorbed somewhere else on the salary lines. I also reduced computer maintenance by $1,000 and reduced the dues and subscriptions by $500. So the total was $2350 was their total reduction. And that ends up about 0.3% over the guideline.
And that fits within
Roughly
your
right at the-
overall scheme as
Right.
well. Yep. That's good. It's not-
But David, we're seeing these are all coming in a little bit over the 1.4, so you're gonna show us ones in later weeks that are under the 1.4, is that the idea?
Yeah, all the major budgets came in above
Yeah, that
one, yeah.
makes sense, I just wanna make sure I'm understanding.
If you take the 1,200 out for those dues, it comes from like 2.25, comes down to 1.98, and then from 1.98, some of what David says, so we're down to like 1.6 something, 1.5 something, I believe, so.
Yeah,
Well,
but the
pretty close,
1,200 is just a means of explaining the
Oh,
increase.
I understand.
Which is great, and it's good to understand, but it won't fly with these advisory people.
Oh, I know.
Like they said right off the bat, Ben said there's 9 of them and there's 3 of us.
But when I only have $5,000.
I understand, understand.
Can I just make one other point?
Yeah.
That relative to the gasoline line item, from a historical perspective, if you look at those numbers, you can see there's been pretty significant gyrations based upon the call volume. So when we talk about things where there could be possible overage, I just want to reinforce, and you saw the email after I retired after last fiscal year, the email just kind of stated that this is an area where we continue to typically underfund.
Yeah, it's
And at the end of
exposure,
the
for
year,
sure,
you know,
yeah.
you just need to realize that the fire department may have to come back to ask for more money for gasoline, and I think this number in this budget is still conservative, which is traditionally what we have done.
Yeah.
But the town faces an exposure. In the fire department, we can't predict what our call volume will be.
Right.
As a result of that, by the way, our gasoline costs, and based on the number of storms, may increase significantly or be lower. So I just wanted to point that out. So
Yeah.
if we get to that point this year, that you're aware that that is an exposure for the
Right.
town.
Great. All right. So we have a request for a fire truck to the tune of 900 grand estimate. And I did read the answers you provided. I appreciate that, to some of the questions I had. He handed them out to us at one meeting, but anyway, so the questions I had, or before I get to those, how about that? You have pictures that you've got, good,
Yeah.
good. All right,
Same picture Ed shows.
Why don't you let, could
The
I,
difference, ours is red, right?
can I suggest procedurally, you let him present the fire truck so that our voters and
very
their
good, okay.
residents can hear what the proposal is before
Before I
you
start-
he's taken apart.
Ripping them apart? I'm not gonna rip them apart.
Let's at least hear what they have to say.
Okay, good to see rust. It's good to see rust in these pictures.
There's plenty of rust on the fire truck,
This one's
yeah.
almost artistic.
I have no idea what this is. I was looking at
This
this
is
one.
his other job, is Neil's other job.
That's a sweet ride. Yeah, that's not rust. There it is.
The current truck, the current engine one, is a 1992 engine with a 65-foot telescoping boom on the top of it that you've probably seen around town. It carries 1,500 gallons of water, has a sizable pump, seats 5, carries our primary fire attack equipment and everything. The ladder on that truck was not necessarily intended strictly as a ladder like you would see a ladder truck in a big city. It's also noted that this truck was custom built for the community. It's 20 years old, but it's now been starting to show its wear and tear. You can take it out and it's like Goldilocks. You can find your way back to the firehouse by just finding the nuts and bolts along the road, and you'll know where you've been. When the truck was built, the town was different. As we all well know, there's been a number of larger homes setback from the road that have been built and are currently being built in the community. A truck that we would need to do has to be custom built. Trying to buy a truck off the rack, as you would say, is really not an option, especially when you're looking at an engine ladder, supply truck, pump truck, which we call a quint, that would be your first due piece. The idea of putting in for a new quint ladder truck pumper has been on the capital improvement plan now for 5 years, so it's not something that I put in when I took the job. This has been on the plan, precedes me. Chief McPherson, Chief Dowes, and a number of other people have been working very hard on it also before I got here. And since then, we've worked with a designer working on putting this together. The town, as I mentioned, has narrow tree-lined streets. It's not intended for large trucks. Even more difficult is the number of the driveways and the access into these driveways. Many of them have stone walls, gates, et cetera, that makes trying to drive a fire truck into the property very difficult. We know that reaching some of these homes is also difficult, and that's why we designed a 79-foot ladder, a true ladder, on top of a pump with 730 gallons of water, foam, and at least 700 feet of 5-inch hose. Reason being, that truck is generally our first due truck. The reason being, too, it has hose, it has water, it can perform fire attack, it can perform rescue, it can drop a supply line from the road. It can do everything that we need as a first due piece versus having an engine or something else going in first and then trying to get a ladder truck in second. We have to be smart in the community just because space is very limited, both between the street and again on the property itself. With the homes being even set back from some of the driveways, that's why we want a ladder so that we can get to the roof, we can get to windows for rescues, but we can also get to the roof to open up the roof and do our firefighting and open up a vent hole. We can also get to the chimneys for the chimney fires in the wintertime. The question has come up about why don't we just call in mutual aid from a neighboring community such as Dover, Framingham, or Natick. The issue is time. With our own fire apparatus in our own community and having that truck being the first truck into the scene, time is of the essence. If we did not have a ladder truck, we'd have an engine in there, and then bringing a ladder truck in from another community might actually be worthless, that truck may not even get onto the property because of the narrowness of the property, may have difficulty getting up the street because we're going to put hose lines in the street. We don't have a water system, so we have to go to the dry hydrants or bring in extra tankers. So that ladder truck may not even be used by bringing it into the community. By having it as our first piece and having it be a multifunctional piece as a quint, we'll get the most bang for our money out of it. Secondly, we have a 1986 International that serves mostly as our brush truck. We have decided not to replace that truck when it becomes obsolete to the community at a savings of about $400,000, which would be the average cost for a new pumper truck. We have the necessary manpower in the community to work with the equipment we have for house fires and structure-type fires. So there's, again, we've been spending quite a bit of time designing this so that we would get the most for our money and the most for the community in a timely manner. The question's also been raised, well, if you're going to get a big truck like that, is it actually going to fit in the firehouse? Yes, we've been doing our math and we've been working with the designers. And the truck that we do intend to get, or would like to get, would fit, obviously, in the firehouse. There's been stories in the past where people have done it the other way around. We're not going to do that.
Can you just say that again briefly?
The fire truck that we are going to design,
Yeah,
or have designed and get for the community,
right.
will fit in
In
the firehouse where
Okay.
the current
That
fire
was a
truck is.
question I had, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep, no, we've done our math on that, and we'll make sure of
Sure it
that.
fits, yep.
Lastly, any truck that we would be looking to buy is looking for size. This size truck could be 1 to 1.5 years before delivery, even if we sign the papers tonight. They wouldn't start building it, obviously, tomorrow, and there's a whole set of plans and issues that go into it. So be looking at mid to late 2015 before that truck would even touch the streets of Sherborn.
How do you pay for it? You pay for it up front or on?
There's a number of different ways of you can pay for fire apparatus, just like your car, but they call a lease purchase programs are out there. But unlike your car, you get to keep it. At the end, you make the payments. The town can decide on how they would like to do a lease purchase if that was the choice of the community. You can put X amount of dollars up. You then, depending on a financing institution, you can have a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 year plan on out. Knowing full well most all these are, you can pay it off at any time. So if you wanted to go with a 3, 4, 5 year plan for the apparatus, say with a lump sum up front, possibly getting a discount on that, then you pay it for a couple of years and then maybe other capitals have been paid off, you have a little bit more in reserve, and then you take that and then just make a final payment on the fire truck, and you've shortened your payment years.
When you talk about it's going to take a year and a half, you put down half and then at the end of the year and a half, you own the rest? Or?
It's usually a percentage deposit up front, and then there's a progress payment, I think around like 2/3 the way through or something like that.
Yeah, my only question is,
Or
we're not
quarters.
really talking about all this money in 1 year, right?
No, basically you'd have the appropriation and then you make that deposit and probably in advance, like,
But I
Which we approved
recall that
tonight.
we have in the past paid it all at once up front because we get some kind of discount right off the bat. So the financial gurus have sat in their computers, with their computers and figured out if we deferred all those payments, we end up paying more than if we pay it all at once and do it with some, they'll give us a bonus for paying it.
I think I mean, that you'd have to have a pretty good deal on that advance payment, because you would have to borrow that money much sooner as opposed to just short-term
And then
borrowing.
you've got a fire truck company holding on to your money before they built your truck.
I would never do it, but,
Yeah, well, I mean,
because these things take, there could be something happen, there could be a disaster in one part of the country, and then they start bumping us back and back and back. So you'd have to have something written in there that there is a penalty if they don't meet that delivery date. But I just, it's tough to give somebody money and not have it deliverable at that time.
No, and I agree with that.
So just a couple of comments. I want to remind you from where we've come. We came from a place where most of the biggest, most expensive fire trucks were purchased within a very short period of time. So between, was it 1990 and 1993, we
Right.
purchased 3 of our biggest fire trucks. So I want to remind you that what you see in front of you is a capital plan.
What did we just buy 2 years ago, whatever it
Years ago,
was?
you bought engine 4. So we've been trying to spread these trucks out
Yeah.
from all being bought at the same time to every 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Which has been our objective over the past 10 years in
Can-
terms of spreading out fire trucks.
Yeah,
So
can we get the schedule of equipment?
I believe you have it in the back packet.
We have it on the back of
You
this
may have it.
package?
You might.
Well, I don't need it right at this very moment, but I just want to get that.
So I just want to point out that that is the objective, and why, that's why this capital plan
No,
was
no,
developed.
no. I want to know, this is a capital plan. Is that all your equipment listed here that you have? Everything is represented on this thing, this schedule?
No, it's not.
That's right. I'm looking for that and your capital plan.
Sure.
Okay, and I don't mean to steal your thunder. I mean, I hear what you're saying, so I'm with you. And in fact, this truck was in last year's annual town meeting report, capital budget committee for fiscal 2015, which is what we're talking about. And it was for 825, so it's a little bit more, but you had the big number there. And then in 2019, you had 400 grand. Is this the brush truck that's going to disappear, or is that something else?
This is a different truck. This is engine 2. And again, this is the truck that we've spread out the longest.
Yeah.
That truck will be 29 years
Okay,
old
yeah.
at that point. And I
Yeah.
just want to remind you, we hope it will last 29 years.
Yeah, there's
But
exposure
if it
there
doesn't,
on
you've
that.
got exposure
Yes.
here in terms of 2 trucks being purchased in a
Yeah.
very short period of time
Yeah.
if this truck continues to be pushed off.
Okay, yeah. Well, here's one of the things, and I appreciate, the pictures are very helpful, particularly where you're showing rust, and you should be prepared to put those up on a screen and point to where, what this means, this rust, because that's the axle and the thing will break, or whatever it is. But, because what we're dealing with, you provided information, this is a truck that goes, on average, 100 miles a month. It's got 24,000 miles on it in 20 years. So my question before seeing those pictures was going to be, what's wrong with this truck besides age? Because it has 24,000 miles and 2,000 hours. And that engine, these Mack engines that
Gotta
you
be
have
more
in
than
this,
2,000.
those are million-mile engines. Those are 20,000-hour engines. And you're talking to a guy that buys and fiddles around with 40-year-old boats with old diesel engines and stuff. So the thing could run forever, other than it's rusting and it's dropping parts as it drives down the road. It's falling apart where it sits, even though it's been garaged, even though it's been well-maintained. So that's part of the story that needs to be even more compelling than I think it is right now, okay? So I'm just sharing that advice
Sure.
as the resident skeptic. The other thing I would love for you to speak to at some point is, the one we have now does 1,500 gallons, as you mentioned. This one's going to have half that capacity, and whether that's an issue or a concern or not, in order to fit it into the station or whatever.
Right. We're also going to supplement it with a 30-gallon compressed air foam system, which will complement Engine 4's 30-gallon compressed air foam system as well. The foam adds penetration to a fire and allows us to use less water but have more efficiency with the getting a fire out. And then again, in a system where we're limited with water, the foam actually is very beneficial
Yeah.
to it. So
Is
it
it
allows us to
equivalent
come
to
down a little
1500?
bit with the water, but again, the reason with the water is because of a weight issue in designing an apparatus these days.
But does that foam allow you to have the same amount of time on a fire as the 1,500 gallons would?
It's still going to be less. It's still going to be less because
So in a town with dry hydrants, it seems like that's a pretty big compromise.
Yeah. So how could you, if you could, would you have 1,500 gallons on this rig? And why can't you?
well, because the truck we'd end up designing wouldn't fit in the firehouse for
Yeah,
one.
okay, there you
It'd
go.
just be too big.
So that's a compromise.
It's a weight issue.
It's a weight issue with the size of the apparatus. Nowadays, with all the safety features and airbags and rollover protection, stuff that 20 years ago this truck
weight
never
issue.
even had, that is automatic no matter what type of truck you're going to order, that you
And
have no control
do we
over.
have a tank on this one we just did? Didn't we have like several hundred gallons?
1,250, correct.
Okay. And that was the one that goes out into the brush fires and stuff, if I remember.
Oh, I'm
correctly.
sorry, the one we just did, the
one we
engine
just
5
bought.
was only 200 gallons, engine 4 was 1,250, which was another pump. So for the structural pieces, you have larger water tanks,
Yeah,
because clearly you need more water for a structural fire than you do for a brush fire.
yeah. There was one other good thought I had, and you're probably glad I don't have it. Oh, data. So, looking at your report that I remember, you had 250 incidents or whatever you described them, not ambulance related, but
Yep.
some amount, nearly 250 incidents. A third of those incidents were false alarms. So that went into the data. Of the 250, 80-something
Right.
were false alarms. 3 were structural fires,
Mhm.
which is what this puppy is designed to deal with, I presume.
Correct.
So it's not like you see a lot of structural fires in the town of Sherborn. Now, when you do, it's a problem. It's an issue. But
Correct.
historically, we're a 2 or 3 structural fire, building fire a year town. And so this is a lot of insurance.
Well, speaking
We're
of
buying.
insurance, is the town's ISO rating, we have to keep, we're currently a 5?
We're 5, yeah?
We're a 5. And that's based on the trucks that we currently have and everything. Once we get a newer fire truck, it'll be probably time, they'll be coming in to do a new evaluation of the community. We're trying to get as much onto the truck to keep and make sure that we stay at a 5. If we were to go with smaller apparatus and maybe not allow the truck, it is quite possible that our ISO rating will go up.
And Peter, another point is, those statistics are deceiving because yes, we have a small number of structure fires. What that doesn't list is the number of chimney fires, which the specific truck would be used for, right?
Okay,
Because we have to
that's
throw the
good.
ladder up to the roof, number
Yeah.
one. It's not taking consideration, for example, small electrical fires that don't spread to the structure because we get there quickly and we find those fires.
Yeah.
And there's a whole host of other calls. This is virtually one of the primary attack engines that we use for any type of structural response. So there's a whole bunch of other categories that we should be looking at
Yeah.
when we talk about those statistics.
Okay. 2 other points I'll make, okay, or questions or whatnot. One is, to the extent that safety of the crew is improved with this, I think that's a point you need to make
Yeah.
for your argument
Right.
here, right? And that doesn't jump out,
Okay.
okay? But the last thing is, depending on the time of day, I could be persuaded to think that it's a good idea to really, really explore other alternatives. And I'm glad you addressed it right up front, Tim, but the other alternatives of regionalization or I don't know, outsourcing, I don't know what, but, and if in fact that's a good idea to, I'm just not there that we've 100% really satisfied ourselves that that's not an alternative. And so I just say that. It doesn't mean
I understand that. That's
It
a
needs
discussion
more.
we can have, but there's not an easy answer to it, and it's not something that, as an answer, we can come up with overnight. That'll
Right.
be,
That's
I mean,
my point. That's my
and that's, something that like Ashland and Hopkinton have been having for a number of years now, and they still may be another year or two away before anything.
Well, would it be
Finalized.
worthwhile for the community to say, geez, yes, we're almost there on this $1 million purchase, but is it worth taking a year and having a committee, heaven forbid, another committee, to look at such alternatives, other alternatives than this? And maybe nobody wants to do that, but I just put it on the table as food for thought. We're not making any votes tonight or anything, so it's food for thought and more of your story, I would hope, too.
What's the trade-in on the existing one, any value,
Probably around $25,000.
grade value or something, yeah?
Yeah, there are some communities and places and/or companies that will buy them up, put a little bit of money into them, and they'll send them down to South America or Central America.
I mean, the engine is broken, just broken in,
The issue-
literally,
The issue is reliability.
yeah.
I took the truck out last week and we had numerous problems with it. So when we talk about
Okay.
what the primary issue is, think about a car that is 25 years old and how reliable that vehicle is going to be. And we had numerous problems this weekend. Now, I want to remind you that even if you chose not to do the latter, and I think the latter complicates this argument, the reality, this is one of two primary attack engines that we have in the town of Sherborn. So even if you said, okay, we're going to regionalize the latter portion of this, you still need to buy a fire truck because you need a secondary attack engine, so your incremental cost to put a ladder on top of this is not that
Yeah, might
great.
as
So
well
I
do it
I
while
hope
you're
that
at
doesn't
it.
get lost as part of the conversation here. This
That-
is one of
that-
two
That
attack
didn't come out
engines.
until just now, Neil, so that's a
Yeah,
good,
right.
good point, too.
Can I ask sort of the question from 10,000 feet looking down on this? Would you say, as the chief of the department and as a professional firefighter, that this piece of equipment now is necessary for the public safety of the residents of Sherborn?
Yes, I would.
And could I ask Neil that too, or?
Absolutely, absolutely. I wouldn't be sitting up here if I didn't believe it.
And so you're both prepared to say that to the
Absolutely.
voters at town meeting?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, we really appreciate it.
Thanks for the
Thank
question.
Any other thoughts, guys? You're
Good.
good? Yeah, okay. Thanks again, really appreciate it.
I'm leaving before you get started.
And,
I'll be back.
some would say we saved the best for last. I don't know if that's true. I don't think it's true. At least until Tim leaves the room.
Yeah.
Then I'll think it's true. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks.
Welcome to Sherborn,
I enjoy
you
it.
know?
I enjoy it.
Look at this guy, a walking woman. How's it going? Really? Well, yeah, tell me about it. I love really. Can I put on my lap? Yeah.
Diane, do you really want to start?
You know, I must say, you guys look marvelous.
Like Billy Crystal?
Absolutely
marvelous. You look marvelous.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. So, thank you for coming, gentlemen. Chief, I see you brought reinforcements. It's always helpful. It always furthers the education of all of us and appreciation, because I know your guys were on the case all night over these last few storms. You're on the case all night, all the time. Oh, I got you. This is for that part of it. Great. Put that right there. All right. So you have a couple of sergeants, a lieutenant, and a police chief we have here in this room. We have the leadership of the Sherborn Police Department. It's
Sergeant Miller, did
outstanding.
you have something to say?
No, sir.
Okay.
Sergeant, how are you enjoying those stripes?
Good so far, sir. Very good. Thank you.
Great.
It's going well.
Family proud of you?
Very proud. Very proud.
It was a fun night.
So where would you like me to start?
Well, do you want to give us an overview? You know, I probably have a few questions.
Oh, I know there's gonna be plenty of questions,
Well, yeah, we're
yes.
gonna do the budget.
Capital
Yeah, we're gonna do the budget.
Sure.
The way I would look at it, we'll do your budget. You just handed out some stuff that's probably talking about cruisers in your budget.
Correct.
And you have a couple of warrant article items. And I'll
Correct.
touch base on those. And then lastly, you have this mutual aid agreement discussion.
Yes.
So I do appreciate we're 40 minutes behind when you were supposed to start. And, but you can see this is all important conversation for
Sure.
us.
I appreciate that. If I may, just for the general public's education, I wanted to explain the process we went through as a community collectively to go through the recent collective bargaining agreement between the town and the police department, because I think that's critical to the discussion we're going to have about the budget. So, for the benefit of the community, the officers, again, worked with the town to negotiate what I think is a reasonable contract and a contract that's going to benefit the town long-term. If I had to surmise the reasoning behind the agreement, I would say that there are three prongs to it. First and foremost, we were able to provide a salary adjustment to the officers based on some comparative communities that were presented to the board, that were presented to the town administrator. Secondly, we were able to avoid potential litigation and potential arbitration based on an opinion from Labor Council. And third, I think that as importantly as the first two prongs, we were able to once again reduce benefit load to the town. So in the approximately 5 years I've been here, we have reduced staffing in the police department by 12.5%, which includes two benefit-loaded positions. So that kind of parlays into my budget presentation.
Okay, just to supplement
Sure.
what you said?
Sure.
Yeah, I think that was a great win-win for everybody, and we said that when we signed and approved the contract. I think you guys, you know, the union members put forth their analysis. We validated the analysis, and the solution worked for everybody. And in fact, I think the town of Sherborn makes out very well in the short term as well as the long term. It was a very innovative approach that you took to pay for where we needed to get to by virtue of staffing changes. You adopted the Pittman schedule, which was on an experimental basis. I would like to get from our town accountant a comparison, because the Pittman was in force for all of calendar 13, I believe. So it'd be interesting to compare how that went versus calendar 12 in terms of overtime and things like that, you know?
Sure.
There may be an analysis. I'd love for us to have that.
And that would be great, but it would be important to remove some of the,
There are outliers.
Correct.
That's right. So it's more to compare the steady state fiscal 12 pre-Pittman versus, not fiscal, calendar 12 pre-Pittman versus calendar 13 steady state Pittman, excluding, you know, folks going out getting injured or to schooling and whatnot.
right. And I do, Peter, want to emphasize that, again, the officers were very willing and open to work with the town.
Yeah,
And clearly,
absolutely.
they get a benefit from this. You know, in our industry, it's unheard of to have every other Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. And I know
Yeah.
that that's a great benefit to the guys that are on the
No,
job.
I think we're very innovative with that, the whole approach, and the Pittman thing is great. One thing on the contract that you're talking about reminded me that we also were going to do some cleanup of the wording in that, because there was a bunch of stuff that we all had agreed we ought to do, and I just want to be sure we
Yeah.
don't lose sight of that.
And just to touch on that, that's on me. I discussed that with David. David gave me direction to meet with Labor Council.
Okay, good.
So Brian Simino and I have been playing some telephone tag over
Yeah.
the last week.
Yeah.
So that'll get done.
And that,
Great.
and you gave some things that, those changes, we have that document, and so
Perfect.
does council have it.
Perfect, yeah, and that's great,
So we'll address all the
Thanks.
questions
All right.
everybody had.
great.
So clearly, I came in well above the 1.4% directive sent by David through advisory. And the major generators of the increases were overtime, salary adjustments, because if you recall, when the officers negotiated the contract, they had a 1% retro due. Then there's going to be another increase of 1%. So
So did that double up in this budget year of 15?
in 15 it does, because
Oh,
you're
I
paying
didn't
1%.
appreciate that. I
You're
thought
paying
the
1%
1%.
backward.
But why wouldn't that be in this fiscal year as an expense?
Well, what I'm saying is, that's not showing in the adjustment, because that number wasn't appropriated in 2014.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? And it's not a
So the
large
base
number.
is lower than reality.
Correct. And additionally, I understand that we got to be focusing on what was appropriated, but if you recall correctly, go ahead.
But our base, so there's my second question that I skipped over.
Sure.
We made certain assumptions. In our analysis,
Right.
in approving everything, we basically said we're in the same place, we've just shifted how we're doing it.
Correct.
Because we've given up a position.
Correct.
So what you described is inconsistent with that, to me. So that's something we can take offline and look further at. Because that retroactive 1% would have been factored into our analysis, which allowed us to say, we're still in the same place as we planned for this fiscal year. You see what I'm saying? So maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, and we can deal with that
Sure,
offline,
sure.
okay? Because if you're correct, that does help explain away where we're at, what we're looking at right now as
Slightly.
submitted. Yes, that portion.
In the other issue, and again, I get, we have to focus on the appropriated number from fiscal year 14.
Yeah.
However, when I presented my budget last year for fiscal year 14, we knew, and I explained to not only the Board of Selectmen, but advisory, that we have to send certain employees to a full academy to meet the law. Last year, when I presented my budget, we didn't have a commitment from the Municipal Police Training Council for a slot for what is now Officer Jimmy Graziano. So I didn't have an opening, so I couldn't produce a number to show what that would cost. Would you
Right.
follow?
Yeah,
Okay.
no.
And that number roughly is $35,000 to include overtime and the monies that we have to spend to send the officer to the academy, pay for certain uniforms, pay for certain equipment, and the $3,500 fee that we have to pay to the state to, it basically is tuition.
Is that line 51300170? Or where is that in?
The overtime number he's talking about?
That's the one that goes from 90,000 to 135?
That, correct. That includes the $35,000 that we feel comfortable saying is going to be the delta to cover the officer going to the academy this year. So we have to fill those 12-hour slots to cover for the officer going off to the academy. And that's the only way we can do that is through overtime. The additional $20,000 to $25,000 is our estimate on what it's going to cost us to offset some of the savings I was predicting from Pittman with the officer that we no longer have. So if you recall correctly, when we first were talking about
Yes.
Pittman, I explained that we had basically a floating officer.
Right, well, what we did is we anticipated overtime under the Pittman schedule would be less, except now we've removed a position, so we knew that there would also be an increase for that absence of that position.
Correct.
Our hope was that the savings was greater than the increase, but you still got an increase to deal with.
Right, and clearly the savings, based on OPEBs and whatnot, is definitely there.
Oh, yeah, no, there's other savings too.
So it's important to understand, for the general public, that $35,000 is just, that additional $35,000 in overtime is a prediction just for fiscal year 15 to get now Officer Van Vliet
Yep.
off to the full academy. So that's not going to be in perpetuity, it's just for next year.
Right. Well, the other thing we have to admit is we I mean, I recall the budgeting of the overtime number for this current fiscal year, and we went deep. We went aggressive on that number, low.
You guys attacked me, let's be honest.
Yeah. But with the strategy that we make it up in supplemental.
Right,
I
right,
mean, that was our strategy.
Right.
And we're seeing it in
right,
budget models.
right. And I don't want to point any fingers.
That's working with advisory and all that. I mean, that was the
Right.
game plan, yeah.
I don't want to point any fingers, but the only person up here not wearing a uniform decided to go get injured this year, too. So that was an amount of overtime expenditure that we certainly we couldn't predict for.
Would you stop picking on the poor man?
Oh,
And for the record, I'm back to work part-time.
he is. He is.
And Jimmy Graziano graduates on February 7th.
So,
Excellent.
So that's
That goes away. Yeah.
Right.
We're hoping some of the overtime will
Yeah.
cut back if he gets back.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hopefully they'll be back.
But somehow they've managed without you, Lieutenant Petco.
no, we haven't actually.
Okay.
Believe me, he's on the phone a lot, and it's not by choice.
Okay,
Technology keeps me connected.
yeah.
So, that's a good majority of the increase in my budget.
Yes.
The other increases in the budget have to do with expenses. And if you look at my budget, there's an increase under new equipment, which is the police cruiser. It jumped from $34,000 last year to roughly $40,000. And the reason behind that is we don't have the luxury of transferring equipment from the vehicle that we're replacing this
I
year.
see, yeah.
Because we were forced to utilize a vehicle that was not really meant to be utilized in a patrol capacity. The vehicle that we used this year was an unmarked car that didn't even have a prisoner cage to protect my personnel. The vehicle that we used, it's vehicle 1515, was a backup car, and it was meant to be a backup car in the event that we had a vehicle serviced, so we could put that back into service temporarily while the line car was being serviced, okay? But because I didn't get funded for the cruiser I needed last year, we were forced.
Because you were looking for 2 cruisers
Correct.
last year? Okay.
Correct. So we got forced to put that into a patrol capacity, and last month we had to flatline that vehicle because the head gaskets blew, and it's going to cost us between $4,000 and $5,000 just to get the thing to pass inspection.
I mean, historically, if you go back 10, 12 years, Sherborn's typically done 1 cruiser 1 year, then the next year it's 2 cruisers.
Correct. And if you look at the literature I handed to you,
Yep.
there's a piece of paper there that I had Ruth Hohenschow do for me, and it lists by year how we purchase cars.
Yeah.
If you start at 2005, you can see that's when the town decided to go 1 cruiser, 2 cruiser, 1 cruiser, 2 cruiser. My first year when I presented my budget, Ruth Chamberlain begged me to not ask for a car that I should have, and I was a new budget maker.
You were a new chief, yeah.
I went with that. And it was always with the understanding that the next year we'd make it up, chief. Well, if you follow that,
So you're still playing catch-up on that decision?
we're playing big-time catch-up. yeah.
And one other thing to remember here is that the cruisers, we talked about our capital policy of the town earlier. The cruisers don't have a useful, even though they're more than $10,000. The town's capital policy is $10,000 and a useful life of 5 years.
Right.
The cruisers basically have a 3-year useful
years.
life if you're lucky,
And
right?
and I shared some literature there about
Yeah, thanks.
what's...
Replacement mileage
Yeah,
and stuff.
and it
yeah.
comes down to roughly 100,000 miles.
Okay.
We put 100,000 miles on a cruiser in 3 years, easily.
Yep.
And it's not with police vehicles, it's not the road mileage that's as critical as the idle mileage.
Understood.
So if you look at the...
It's a rough 100,000 miles, the worst way you could run an engine.
Right, and if you add the idle time
That's what I mean,
to
yeah.
the road mileage, you're averaging roughly 250 to 300,000
Yeah.
miles on the vehicle. So they take a beating, and there's a tremendous amount of wear and tear on the car. So that's part of the increase. If you look under the new hire equipment, we had 0 in that line for 2014. That $6,500 includes the tuition for the academy for Officer Van Vliet, and the uniforms and equipment that we're required to provide to him while he's going through the academy.
So he's going next fiscal year?
We have a spot for him in August of 2014.
Okay, so it is next fiscal year.
Correct.
All right.
Maybe last.
And that'll
He's
be
the
it.
last one, yeah,
That'll be it.
that's awesome.
And other than that, there's, a few $100s here, a few $100 there. We increased our gasoline line from $2,500 last year to $30,000 this year, because if you look at the history of our gas line, we've been underfunding that.
Right, so you're taking a realistic funding approach to
Correct.
that. Yep.
Correct.
Yep. Good. On the revenue side of the first page,
Sure.
is there any room to charge more on I'm talking about details for now.
Sure.
I don't know. I'm always confused how that all works, and I don't want to know exactly, but the question is whether there's opportunity to charge a higher rate or a higher rate of admin fees, or manage it better to get more money, more revenue. That's something to explore if there's opportunity to explore,
There might be some wiggle room to increase the admin fee.
Yeah.
And the only reason I say that is just speaking with some of my peers, some other towns charge a 15% admin fee. I believe we charge a 10% admin fee.
So that's something
something
for our
to look at.
policy.
That statute,
Statute
it's
is.
statute
yeah.
said 10%.
Is 10%?
I'm sorry, Paul,
The statute says 10%,
is that what the statute says? Yeah, so some of my
Maybe
peers
no
might not be,
but you can do a home rule petition, try and get something different.
The other thing we just did is the rate went up. So
Okay.
with the rate going up to 10%.
Goes up as well.
what we did do, and this was after discussion with my command staff, we did start charging a fee for details that utilize or are required to use a police vehicle. We hadn't done that in the past.
Oh, very
Okay.
good.
And that, the reason behind that was to maybe offset some of the wear and tear in the car.
Yep.
And what was that fee? How's that work?
25 per 4 hour block.
So-
A lot of other towns have jumped on it and have gone a little higher, so that might be an area where we could
Yeah,
walk it up.
we could.
Excellent. There are no animal control fees in this page.
Correct.
Because we never went down that road. We haven't
Nope.
gone down that road yet? Is that,
What
where
transpired
did we last leave that?
is this. When I presented the idea of increasing the animal control officer's salary, I sat with our animal control officer, and we were going to set up a fee schedule.
Yeah,
That was when Jim Purcell was here
yeah,
temporarily, and then there was a gap
yeah.
where Jim wasn't here and David came through the door. So David and I have discussed this, and David, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and we had some shared concern about liability. Sending the animal control officer into somebody's house to remove certain rodents, so to speak.
Well, there's that, but there's also, there's a gray area where the animal control officer is doing something that arguably should be the homeowner's burden.
Correct. And frankly, the animal control officer, by statute, is really only supposed to be dealing with domesticated animals, so, cats and dogs.
Oh,
The reason why we sat with Joe Shepherd and came up with this idea to kind of hopefully offset the increases in his salary was because Joe was willing to do that for the town.
yeah.
So,
So we haven't changed anything on his number of hours or anything in this budget.
it's the same, right,
It's the same thing, right?
But I'm glad you brought up the animal control
Yeah, because you
position.
have other stuff going.
Because I just hosted a meeting about a month and a half ago with Natick, Framingham, Holliston, Hopkinton, and Ashland. And that included a few of the town administrators from those communities. And we are actively discussing the idea of regionalizing animal control. And the hope is going to be that Framingham will be the host community, and that simply because they have a full-time kennel, and that we're slowly vetting out expenses and costs, and what the supplies would be, and it's an ongoing
There's
discussion.
more to follow on that,
Yeah,
which is a
yeah.
great exercise that you're going through. It could
Right.
be something pretty useful.
So,
Great, okay. Yeah, so I guess I hope we're on track with what we did in the contract.
I believe strongly that we are.
And so if we can just figure out what you and I are talking about, that we
Sure,
may misunderstand each other,
sure.
that would be helpful for me.
Okay.
I know David now has some thoughts about trying to make part of the challenge go away and so forth.
Yeah, and I've talked about this stuff with the chief, and we have to talk about how palatable it is. One is, I had reduced the increase in the overtime. I reduced it by 15,000.
Yep,
And that isn't based on anything other than a gamble that it's, that we can make ends meet.
yeah. And our fallback, again, is supplemental.
Right, so it's just, where do you want it? Do you want it in your back pocket with the recommendation that the likelihood is that they're gonna come back and need it?
Yeah,
Or do you put it in the budget now? And if I have to get down to 1.4%, that's what I would take, and I would keep it in my
Understood.
back pocket.
yeah,
The other item was the vehicle,
yeah.
was eliminating the purchase of the vehicle.
Yeah,
I
I
think
can-
that's the most
That's the,
contentious thing that requires discussion, because if you don't reduce that there, then there
gotta
isn't
find it
really.
somewhere else.
Yeah, you're gonna have to find it someplace else. But
to
you're not gonna
meet
find it.
advisory's guidelines, you have to
Right.
find it somewhere else.
Right, you're not gonna find it in this budget.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd be, personally speaking, I don't like the idea of eliminating the cruiser. I've seen it when I was on advisory, it just forever has bitten us in the butt when we've done that. So I'd rather go to advisory with my weaponry on that one. Just, that's my take of it. But more will develop where, you know, would you say the outcome of what we've done tonight, or what we're doing on these, particularly on these budgets, will be reflected in what you present to advisory when the selectmen's budgets are brought to them?
Yeah, if I have a good feeling of where you
Where we're
the
at,
folks
yeah.
are at,
Yeah,
and
so
we
we'd
have one
wanna-
more meeting
we'll have-
before
By then, we'll
that.
have seen everything, and we'll then vote on
Right.
the budgets reflecting the changes we've talked about. This may be one where we have
It's
this
really
chip
these
to play.
drivers. You know,
Yeah, I
these
Yeah, we're
big-
gonna see everything before we
Yeah,
can make that.
it's really these big drivers, the Board of Selectmen budgets, like the general government and stuff, those increases aren't, I think we actually held them flat.
We flatlined all of
Yeah.
Understood.
So the only other one would be transfer station. That would be the only other big ticket item.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, do we, and again, this can't be a this year thing, but, you know, we see all these budgets with line items for telephones, and, you know, we see all the utility budgets bills come through on the warrant, you know, 15
Right.
different electric bills, or however many we get. I mean, is there savings to be found in kind of systematically consolidating accounts and figuring out ways to avoid duplicate effort?
I'm sure there is at some point. I think we've talked some about the different bills and how the billing's done, and it's something that we gotta work more on, but it's.
It's not specific to police, I'm talking
No,
about
no, no,
across
right.
all the departments.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I-
But there's the internet bill, the phone, all the fuel bills.
We
and it-
saw today, there's an electric bill for the recreation department, there's an electric bill for the
Right.
fire department, electric bill for the street lights,
Right.
electric bill for police.
And I have been
6
through
hours.
it. When you sit down with NSTAR to try to get the billing the way that you want to get it, it's a major effort, but it is worth it once it's done. And so it's just having the time to do it.
And just to touch on that a little bit, and I did discuss this with David, Mike, to answer your question. We had, at one point, shared phone service, cell service, between CM&D, police, and fire. And actually, I want to say it back then, the Selectman's office as well. And that went on for about a year, or maybe even 2. And then I want to say it was CM&D, Ed had a problem with his cell phone service with that particular service or provider we had that year at his house, and you know, frankly, it's critical for him to be able to use his phone at his house because of his responsibilities. So it's not like we haven't, you know, explored these options and made efforts. It's just, you know.
But we
it's-
have double-checked that all the cell phone bills, we're getting state contracted rates. It's when we,
So consolidation wouldn't save much other than.
other administratively and being
Right.
able to understand
Well,
it.
that's it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the piecemeal part of it's.
We just got an answer on that last night, actually. Sergeant Nalty's been working with Sprint.
Okay.
And the way that we're doing it now with police, fire, and the transfer station, because we dropped the selectman's office and we dropped Ed when he got out. But the comparison was showing a savings.
Between $30 and $50 a month by consolidating everybody onto one plan and sharing data as opposed to having the police, fire, sanitation department
Right.
with having different plans within one bill. We consolidated
Yeah.
one plan and we're saving between $30 and $50.
I mean, we met with the Verizon representatives as well to look at the whole thing, so it just requires more looking at and going back and forth. I think traditionally, police have always, not just here, everywhere, are tied to Sprint, I think because of the
reception.
click to,
No,
what do you call it?
Direct.
we tried to go to Verizon for our laptops because they're all wireless and the Verizon service, while phone service might be, better in certain areas,
Right.
it was horrendous. And the
Data
laptops were basically
was-
ineffective
yeah.
without Sprint.
Right.
So that's why we're kind of tied to Sprint at this point in time,
Yeah.
because it was night and day with literally ineffective or effective with the carrier.
And just to further explain that is extremely important to my personnel to have access to criminal information when they're pulling vehicles over and interacting with people. So, you know, it might cost a little bit more, but it is what it is.
Yeah,
Safety
so
issue.
it's, I think it's something that we can continue to try to look
Yeah,
at.
yeah, good. Any further on the budget here, gents?
No.
No, okay. Let's move then to your
Taking advantage of going last, we don't have. to-
capital items.
I didn't ask
Well,
for a
it's all-
helicopter, Mike, you know.
It's all, it's all overtime and salary and whatnot. So you have, Rick, you've got a command vehicle and a radar message board.
Correct.
All right. You want to start with, on the command vehicle, what's your,
Sure. So that ties into my budget, frankly, because, as I mentioned, we were forced to use our backup car in a patrol capacity. And I've been instructed, and I agree to this, that, we should be, as budget makers, thinking outside the box. So my thought process behind asking for a command vehicle this year is very similar to why the fire chief asked for a command vehicle on a capital project.
last year, yep.
And it's simply this. My idea is going to be to take my Taurus, my Ford Taurus that I use. It's all-wheel drive. It has roughly 46,000 miles on it, and put it back to replace the unmarked car that we were forced to use last year. The command vehicle, I can extend the life of that vehicle for well over 10 years because I'll be the one operating it. And because things have changed clearly for policing, and the marathon's a great example of that, we have to have the capability of not only responding to major incidents in our town, but we're slowly going to be introducing the idea of providing regional service to our neighbors. So I explained to the guys this year, while it hasn't been requested yet, I'm going to guess that when the marathon comes through this year, we're going to be required to pretty much have all hands on deck to help out. Because, clearly there's going to be, heightened security on the marathon route. So, and that's just one example. When we have to respond to mutual aid with surrounding communities, I used the example when I first became chief. Your entire police department, when I was working in Framingham, responded to Framingham when a Framingham police officer got shot in the face. And we need to have the capability to set up command posts, not just in town, but elsewhere to assist with our neighboring communities. I feel strongly that we have an obligation to assist our neighboring communities, just like they have an obligation to assist us. So that's kind of the basis, or the basics of why I'm pushing for the.
So without even addressing what we're going to talk about last,
Sure.
an example would be an incident at the regional schools. You would get a request from the Dover Police to help out,
Correct.
and they would do that through mutual aid. That process already exists today to enable us to assist in a situation over in Dover.
That's correct. The town voted and accepted mutual aid back in 1964, I believe. So the way mutual aid exists right now, works right now, is through transactional authority. Dover, if something happened at the regional school, would have to call the commanding officer and request assistance.
So now, how would this $40,000 vehicle make us better at it?
We'd be able to put in a grease board, equipment that we'd need to respond to an emergency.
Would you be commanding our guys that are responding to something like that, or also with whoever else is there?
It would, in a major incident like that, we'd run what's called unified command. However, you'd most likely have certain groups reporting to one separate group.
Yeah.
And then,
But can you do that with your car right now? These are questions that people, I'm sure, will
sure.
ask you to, to
the
help
vehicle I have,
support what you're
has
trying to
a
do.
trunk. It's not capable of.
Carrying the kit you
Carrying-
need to do
Correct.
it right, okay.
Right, the emergency equipment that we.
So this would have other emergency
Correct.
equipment with it,
Correct.
and that's built into the number that's being
Correct.
requested
And
to fully
this
outfit it.
offsets an existing, the spare car you were talking about before?
Right, it replaces my car will replace the spare car that we were forced to use.
Which is no good, essentially.
It's done. It's done.
You mentioned a grease board?
Correct.
What's a grease board?
It's a whiteboard.
The whiteboard
Whiteboard.
that you can write on to,
It goes in the vehicle?
yeah, they can expand out. We kind of looked at those. You can pull it out and it'll expand to the back of the SUV that I'm looking to buy.
Thought I heard that wrong.
Cost
It's a $40,000 to $45,000 car.
45.
Yeah,
SUV.
SUV,
Correct.
thank you.
But it avoids, if I'm hearing you right, you've currently got a department Taurus, and you would put that back in the fleet,
Correct.
rather than buying a new vehicle to replace the one that was the spare.
Yes and no. That's a difficult question, difficult answer for that. The vehicle that we were forced to use was the unmarked car.
Yeah.
That should have been a marked car all along.
Should have been a what, a mark?
Right, a patrol vehicle.
Okay.
Okay, rather than the backup vehicle that it was intended for.
Yeah.
So that unmarked car would sit in the lot in the event that, guys needed to go to training, they'd use that vehicle. If they needed to go drop evidence off at the state lab, they'd use that vehicle. We'd use it as a backup vehicle in the event that one of the other marked cars had to be serviced, short-term, long-term. It wasn't intended to be a patrol vehicle.
Yeah.
So we need to have a backup vehicle at the police department for those exact reasons. So,
And so the Taurus would become that?
correct.
Okay. You good? Let's talk about the radar message board.
I'm actually going to defer to Lieutenant Bento because he's the one that did all of the research, and he has a better grip on
Okay.
everything that was done on that.
So do you want to give me an overview, or do you want me to hit you with the 3 questions I have?
Go right ahead.
Well, here's what I want to know, okay?
Just,
You want the
better
overview.
off to have an overview because the voters are listening and they want to know what this is all about.
Sure.
Okay.
Hey, Rick, can you turn the mic so he's got
Right
it?
now, we have a trailer, which is also going to be something we need a vehicle that can tow it around town, that displays through radar what a vehicle's speed is. It also has data collection capabilities and can be used for studies and determining where we conduct radar. And it's also become something that residents quite frequently request. I'm the one that usually gets the requests, and I'm the one that has to usually give the bad news that there's problems with the trailer, and that's the point we're at now. We're having a lot of problems with it. It's one of those, it sits outside, it's supposed to be weatherproof, but like anything else, moisture gets in and computer parts break down, radar parts get old and don't work. And it's basically at the point now where instead of putting $500 or $1,000 into it every 6 months or a year, we looked into replacing it. And the replacement unit that we looked into also has the capability of being used as a message sign, similar to the signboard that we had a donation for a few years back. That can be something that can be in high demand, and sometimes when you want to relay a message, you don't want to just relay it in one direction. You want to be able to let people know that it go in both directions. So this would give us the option to do that. It also has some other features where the traffic counts and, crushing data. It's also equipped with some security features, which the current unit doesn't have. So I have to take that into account when I put it out. I wouldn't want to put it in an area where it's not in good lighting or have a house nearby because you worry about vandalism or theft. This unit's actually even equipped with a camera, so if someone did vandalize it, you could go back and check and get photographs of them. It can be used, the camera can be used similar to the way the town used the cameras at Weston and Whitney for viewing the intersection. You can do that. We've discussed, we're not looking to use it as an enforcement mechanism. We're not going to mail out tickets if somebody goes too fast. That's not the intent. It's more for awareness and, again, look back into traffic calming measures. The other thing is the company that we have a price from, they are on a state bid list, and they were the only company willing to give us any kind of trade-in on the current unit. So that was what made me lean towards that company. They're also the company that we deal with currently for our radar equipment, so they maintain, repair, certify, take care of all that.
And it's also important to share that the unit that we have now that clearly is failing, that was purchased 3 town administrators ago. I want to say it was Dennis Luttrell that purchased
Yes.
that particular piece of equipment. And there was no warranty bought with it.
So is this one going to last long enough for David to retire from the town of Sherborn?
David, how old are you now? 26, 27? It should. And they're giving us a 2-year warranty.
Yeah.
And then after the 2-year warranty runs out, I'm gonna have to come back and ask for $500 a year to kind of make.
price on this?
10,100.
I didn't have it in front of me. Thank you.
I
Sounds
do.
good.
Yeah, so reading the notice of intent, it used the description that the one we have is in need of immediate replacement. So the question that I would have is, how did we let something get to that position? Why wouldn't, maybe that's a bad phrase to have used or something, but it,
That was my phrase, yeah.
well, okay, that explains it, never mind.
It's my fault. I take full.
No, but you see what I mean? So really, but then what you describe what we have, it's quirky, but it isn't completely useless.
Well,
Or is it
at
completely
this point
useless?
now, it's not ready to go out. And if
Okay.
we wanted to make it ready to go out, just guesstimating, it could be $500 or $600.
Okay.
And that could last a week, or it could last a couple of months, so we don't know. In the past, I've had them come out and replace one thing, and 2 weeks later,
So
there's
we've
something
been
else wrong.
duct taping it together to
It's
keep
just-
it going.
Yeah, the expense to repair the thing is just getting
Yeah.
outrageous.
And I'm
Is
glad
there
you,
some kind of storage method that you would change for a new one, so it's not, would you leave it in the CM&D garage or someplace else where it's covered over?
I think we're probably going to have it deployed the majority of the time when we get it. That's one of the things. I mean, we do see a great demand for it. This time of year is the time of year where I would say, with the snow, it's not a real good idea to have it on the side of the road, and you get plows going by, and you've got snowbanks. So maybe if we could store it at the CM&D and only use it on an emergency basis as a message board, And then when the spring comes, then we deploy it as a radar trailer again. That
And-
might help make it last longer.
And this is what, rechargeable battery operated as well as solar?
It's also
So
slowly,
it makes no noise when it's sitting out there.
Right. The current one just works off 2 deep cycle batteries, and when it's dead, we have to drag it back and plug it in for a couple of days, trickle charge it back up, and then take it back
Yeah.
out.
I'm glad you said that with the picture-taking thing, that you aren't going to use it for enforcement.
Well,
Just speaking as a resident.
Well, there was,
Make
there was
exceptions.
an SOS committee member that asked me about that, putting some type of camera at the lights that we have, one set of lights we have in town. And in lieu of, or actually utilizing that and removing a police officer. And they brought up examples of how they do this in Boston, and I explained that none of that has been upheld in a motor vehicle appeals with the clerk of courts, because we have to show operation. So you can't just take a picture of somebody going through a light, or a vehicle going through a light, and then present that in court and have that upheld.
Yeah.
We actually have to stop the person, identify them, and cite them, so.
Well, remember a few years back, there was some effort, I think you had the effort to put some cameras in a couple of spots in town. And one or more residents at advisory public hearing raised their concerns about,
I'm not sure there's
You
any
know.
effort to put cameras.
No,
in.
it was the opposite.
Extensive
Right.
effort to prevent putting cameras.
Right.
oh, that's what it
Right,
was. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
There was
Well, you
a-
may, but the point is that that sensitivity may surface, and you need to be ready to deal with that. And part of that presumably is really talking up how this thing gets used and how it's beneficial, and, because it has a whole bunch of features that are pretty neat. And it's not a huge dollar item, so.
You make it back in tickets.
Particularly when we put it up on
Long
Woodland
term.
Street somewhere.
Yes, Elliot?
You might put some of these cameras at the railroad crossing. See the number of cars that come across and the lights are flashing.
Yeah.
Particularly that 7:15 in the morning, when people are all hurrying, and this freight train comes through as slow as you could jog through town. Why, it's very tempting to crash through, but,
All right.
okay.
Good point.
Keep it off the tracks.
All right, so I think that's great on your budget and your capital thing. Then we have next on the agenda a pile of papers, so.
Pile of
How about
papers.
you talk about
Sure.
what you're trying to do there, Rick?
So,
You need a break?
run to the men's room.
Okay, sure.
Run-
Just have the warrant articles, let's not forget those.
No, we're not doing those tonight. I'm
No, we're
told.
not. Okay.
no, I was asked to spread those out to
Just-
limit my amount of talk
All right.
time.
Yeah, we'll
Plus-
get you back another night.
That's all.
All right, so Rick's going to explain what he's trying to do here. Paul, hopefully you won't miss too much of it, if that's all right.
Yeah. So if I may, this has to do with mutual aid. If I may, I'd like to read a letter generated by the Middlesex County Chiefs of Police Association, which represents 54 cities and towns in the Commonwealth. And it's dated July 12, 2013. It's addressed to me, Chief Richard Thompson III, Sherborn Police Department, 17 Washington Street, Sherborn, Mass. 01770. Dear Chief Thompson, Middlesex County Chiefs of Police Association is committed to excellence in policing in collaboration with all of our law enforcement partners, working to ensure the safety of all persons in Middlesex County and beyond. Recent events in both Massachusetts as well as other states have highlighted the need for interagency partnerships and underscore the fact that the public expects and demands that municipal law enforcement agencies be structured so as to support one another in times of natural disaster, acts of terrorism, school violence, or any other event that could threaten the safety of our communities. To that end, we have tasked a subcommittee with drafting an interagency memorandum of understanding, an MOU, as authorized by Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 40, Section 8G, that was recently upheld in a decision by the Supreme Judicial Court in Commonwealth v. Bartlett, SJC-11187. After a number of meetings with the support of the Arlington Legal Department and Attorney Juliana Rice, who, by the way, used to work for the Attorney General's office, the subcommittee presented the final draft to the membership on June 27th in Acton. Following the endorsement of the Middlesex Chiefs, the interagency MOU received final edits and was approved by Attorney Jack Collins of the Massachusetts Chiefs of Police Association. And I'd like to add also that Jack is also legal counsel to the International Association of Chiefs of Police, so Jack knows his stuff. This interagency MOU empowers on-duty, I'll say that again, on-duty police officers in one jurisdiction to legally enforce the laws of the Commonwealth and respond to public safety emergencies in all other participating jurisdictions under a defined set of guidelines. In other words, it lawfully resolves issues related to the LeBlanc decision, which I've provided to the board members. The membership voted unanimously to distribute the interagency MOU countywide and ask all member agencies to secure the approval and signatures of their respective municipal authority. Subsequently, you are receiving the approved documents, and we request that you perform the following actions. Number one, Massachusetts Interagency Mutual Aid Agreement. This document has been drafted in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 8G, the recent Commonwealth v. Bartlett decision, and it has been reviewed and approved by numerous municipal attorneys. Immediate action requested. Please secure municipal approval and return the MOU with original signatures to Chief Robert Bongiorno, Middlesex Chief Secretary, at the Bedford Police Department, 2 Mudge Way, Bedford, Mass. 01730. Note, also include the date that your municipality accepted provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 80, Section 8G. Number 2, model policy statement. The final draft interagency MOU authorizes participating agencies to implement policy that guides their agency members on the application, the operational, and the supervisory concerns related to this MOU. Immediate action requested. Middlesex Chiefs strongly encourage participating agencies to enact department policy. Electronic copies of this model policy can be obtained by contacting Arlington Police Chief Frederick Ryan at fryan@town.arlington.ma.us. Number 3, model training bulletin. As with any complex legal issues relating to police jurisdiction, it is imperative to the successful implementation of this program that participating agencies properly train their personnel. Immediate action requested. We have attached a model training bulletin, and we strongly encourage all participating agencies to train their personnel on the MOU, the policy statement, and the spirit and intent of this initiative. I want to thank the subcommittee for their leadership on this important law enforcement issue, and we look forward to receiving your signed interagency mutual aid agreement as soon as possible. Please do not hesitate to contact me or any member of the executive board with any questions. Sincerely, Stephen F. Shaw, Chief of Police, Town of Weston, President of Middlesex Chiefs. David actually is very familiar with Chief Shaw. He worked in Weston for some time. So I brought this information to David, and originally we had discussed, some concerns that I had, and some of the concerns I had with the mutual aid agreement were quickly answered when I spoke with Chief Ryan from Arlington, and he frankly brought up a simple fact that our officers are required to go to Superior Court in Woburn, Massachusetts, and there's always a potential for us to have to act beyond our jurisdiction and beyond the towns that are contiguous to Sherborn. And frankly, the way the law reads now, a police officer without this mutual aid agreement, one of my police officers in full uniform on duty in Woburn, which is where the Superior Court would be acting as a citizen. He'd frankly be making a citizen arrest if he had to intercede in some type of crime. So I strongly believe, particularly where we're looking into regionalizing certain services, that we should take part in this mutual aid agreement. I think it's important, not just for the community, it's important for the surrounding communities. I think it's important for our relationship as a town with other communities where we're asking to regionalize certain services with towns that are beyond the borders of Sherborn. So I fully support this initiative, and I really don't see any downfall to the town.
And this is for Middlesex County. This is a mutual aid agreement with all the communities in Middlesex County that also sign up for it, right?
Correct.
So how many, I don't know how many towns are in Middlesex County.
54 cities and towns.
54 cities and towns.
Correct.
And about how many right now are not signed up for this?
As of today, There is Waltham, Newton, Cambridge, Sherborn, and I believe Natick still hasn't signed, but I've been assured by Chief Hicks, the Natick chief, that they are going to sign off on this.
And so this would cover us within those communities in Middlesex County. You'd be subject to the same mutual aid agreements that are enforced for something like Dover, like we talked about earlier.
Correct.
Is that the same kind of agreement with Dover?
The agreement, we don't have a written agreement. This is a written agreement with all the cities and towns in Middlesex County. The way mutual aid would work with Dover is we would have to follow certain protocol. So if there were an incident in Dover at the regional school, Dover would have to contact us by phone and request mutual aid. That's what they call transactional authority. So there would be some steps to that. That's for a major incident. If Lieutenant Bento or one of the sergeants were to follow a vehicle into Dover as we speak, or any of the communities that surround Sherborn right now, and they were observing the operator to be traveling over the fog line or traveling over the center line, that obviously to us means that somebody, there's either a medical issue or somebody's operating under the influence of some type of substance. We wouldn't be able to just stop that vehicle once it crossed over the line into Natick. We'd have to actually reach out to Natick and say, hey, this is what we have. We would like to initiate a motor vehicle stop. So what this does is it removes that step, which frankly could be critical in time consuming, if in fact somebody were operating under the influence of a motor vehicle and decided to crash into a car into Natick.
Okay, so play that out. So somebody's driving along, they're heading into Natick. You're under this agreement, Natick's got this agreement, and you can stop them.
Correct.
And then is the protocol that you then call Natick, or are you making the arrest and doing everything else?
We make the arrest.
And where do you bring them?
We bring them to Sherborn.
Okay. And why is that better?
I don't know that the word would be better. I think it's a more safe option than what we have.
Well, that's what I'm asking you.
It's a safer means of handling these kind of situations.
There won't be any delay, it'll be immediate. So let's say if someone's involved in a domestic and we see them leaving town, they get into another town, currently we would have to call officer in charge to officer in charge. We'd like to stop this person. Okay, what do you have? What's the reason? Let me find out, let me get in touch with the OIC. Now if it happens, domestic happens in Sherborn, we follow them over the line into Holliston, we can pull them over and make the arrest on a domestic that they just committed in this town without having a delay, without giving them an option of getting further away. If it's someone that's an OUI, there's less time for them to continue to operate and have the potential to create injury or liability upon someone else.
Right.
Now, how do you feel as chief about Natick doing that or Holliston doing that, stopping somebody who came across the line into Sherborn, maybe arresting them in Sherborn, taking them back to Holliston or Natick, and you don't know anything about it?
Oh, no, you'd communicate
Well, that's what I'm asking you, yeah.
after the fact. I mean, you certainly would say, this is what we've got going on, after the fact, though. So for us, time's critical. So any kind of delay in those kind of situations, it places the general public at risk.
Mhm.
So we would stop the vehicle and initiate interaction with the operator of the vehicle, and we'd obviously get on the radio, communicate with the dispatcher. The dispatcher would ultimately call Natick and tell them what's going on. I mean, that's not gonna go away. There's gonna be communication here. But this
And the
does.
other way around, so Holliston's not
Correct.
gonna come and have a shootout?
Oh, no,
on Western Avenue
no.
And leave and not tell you anything?
Absolutely not,
Yeah.
absolutely not.
And so once Natick signs up, all the Middlesex County towns surrounding Sherborn
Except they don't,
will have signed up for
but
this.
Medfield's not in Middlesex.
Correct.
Dover's
No,
not in
no, I
Middlesex.
understand, yeah,
Right,
no, I'm
right.
talking about the ones in
And
Middlesex.
that's an important point, Mike, and I'm actually going to be bringing that up at my first meeting as a member of the executive board for Mass Chiefs. I'm going to ask where Norfolk County, because Medfield and Dover and Millis are in Norfolk County. I'm going to ask the representative from Norfolk County to where they are at with this. The Middlesex Chiefs of Police Association clearly is taking the lead on this, And I feel comfortable saying that the other counties are probably going to follow suit.
And so it'll be
At some
more
point.
of a statewide issue?
Correct.
So right now, again with Natick, so you have Natick, you have Framingham, you have
Ashland?
Ashland and Holliston,
Holliston,
all signed up
correct,
on this thing.
right.
And so what is it you're looking for us to do?
I need you guys to sign some paperwork to, as the municipal, how do they term that?
So Framingham's done this, they have the same legal counsel, so
Yes,
they've presumably vetted this agreement for
Correct.
Framingham.
correct. And Brian Simino, who is also Labor Counsel
Yep.
for us in Framingham, is, you know, completely supportive of this, and, you know, in his words, it's a no-brainer, so.
David, what are your hesitations on this? I know you had some hesitations.
I think, I mean, we've had some time to talk about it, the chief and I. Originally, I was interested in just individual mutual aid agreements with the town surrounding Sherborn. I just couldn't wrap my head around the whole county-wide thing, because it's not just a problem in Sherborn, it's not just a problem in Middlesex County, it's a problem completely across the state. So I did some research about, I think there's a bill in front of the legislature about addressing this specific issue. It hasn't been passed.
Right.
And I think they've tried to address this issue about
LeBlanc.
pulling over drunk drivers for 23 years. Or
Right.
so this is an effort to remove that problem.
And we have authority as a Board of Selectmen to sign an intermunicipal agreement. And
Right.
esteemed council, if this turns out to be the worst idea in the world, in a year from now, we've got, you know, for whatever reason, citizens up in arms about this, can you unsign an intermunicipal agreement, or are you stuck? What's the procedure?
In terms of the
Get
agreement?
out of it?
What are the termination provisions of the agreement?
I don't know why it would be the worst thing in the world, but, you know, it's sort of an experiment, it's a new thing.
I thought I saw the agreement around somewhere.
Is this the agreement, Rick? This is,
It's in there, yeah.
It's behind this email from the chief to Diane, December 30th.
yeah, the Sherburne draft.
The written MOU, and it goes into,
I don't know that.
Well, this is a policy, I see. This is a policy, this is not the agreement.
Yeah, I don't
I don't know if we have the agreement.
know that we-
I forwarded everything I had.
And I remember seeing it another time when we had a big
I
package.
think that's the policy.
That's the policy.
This isn't the agreement?
The MOU with the Arlington thing on the front, is this the
It is.
agreement?
That's a policy, that's a policy.
Policy on.
Yeah.
So I don't think we've got the agreement, Rick.
Yeah.
I forwarded the agreement, I'll have to double check.
Yeah. Yeah, if
What
we don't have it in
policy
this
is-
package, that's pretty clear.
Yeah, this isn't the agreement. If somebody would give me the actual agreement, I'd be able to answer Michael's question as to how you get out of it.
Well, maybe we should put it on for next week's meeting and figure it out between then and now.
Yeah, that works, because we don't have the agreement, we have nothing to sign here.
You know what?
So, and you brought your marvelous-looking guys, in large part because of this tonight.
No, actually,
Or-
this was part of it, of course, because they're the ones that are out there doing the job.
Yeah.
Really. But I also brought them along because David and I had discussed about some of the budget concerns, and there was some questions
Okay.
about training, and I wanted these guys to share with the board. Maybe this is a good time to do this. Maybe take 5 minutes just to share
Sure.
with the board, you know,
Sure.
some of the,
They've sat here since 6 o'clock tonight, and love to get the full benefit of,
You know they were having
Your
fun,
presence.
yeah, Peter, I mean.
well,
Yeah.
this is a show, this is a theater when they're here, so.
but I definitely I want them to share some of
Dinner
the trainings that they've gone to and the benefits from the training. And probably as importantly, the fact that they haven't come after the town for travel expenses and
Oh.
some instances, flights. And, you know, basically, these guys have stepped up. Well, basically, actually, these guys have stepped up and asked to go to certain trainings that are, you know, critical training for us,
Yeah.
without incurring costs to the town, major costs to the town. I kind of wanted them to kind of share those experiences.
Love to hear.
Go ahead, Lieutenant. You can start.
Well, the chief mentioned flight and travel.
Mike, can you pull the mic
I
close?
did take advantage of one of those opportunities, and again, I think the chief deserves some credit. He made it a major step when he came in to make sure that training was increased. They often use in training, there are two things that cost towns and police departments a lot of money. I know we have some lawyers here. And with police departments, the top two are fail to train and fail to supervise. And the chief has made an effort to bring us in and bring us up as supervisors and as leaders, and he's made it a big effort to get us to leadership training. One of the biggest ones so far has been the FBI Leader Organization. I've had the opportunity to attend 4 trainings now with FBI Leader, and Sergeant Tedstone has finished 2. Sergeant Nolte has just completed his first. I did take an opportunity to do some out-of-state travel for one. I had a course scheduled for Connecticut, and I was going to take the unmarked car and go stay in Connecticut for a week, and it was postponed, and it was rescheduled in Nashville, Tennessee. And being a big country music fan, I approached the chief and said, if I pay for my airfare and my rental car, do you mind if I stay in Nashville rather than in Connecticut? And he said, go right ahead. And in addition to having some, fun checking out Nashville, Tennessee, I had the opportunity to attend a real quality training that was held at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, which in Tennessee, it's sort of their own, sort of mimics the FBI, only on a state level. In Massachusetts, when we need criminal investigation, we go to the Mass State Police. They have crime labs, and they do fingerprinting, photographing, they do the detective work on murder cases, things like that. Tennessee, they have the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. And it was a very impressive facility and a great group of people, and they hosted the training. They had some great instructors. I've had instructors since I've been attending these courses. They've been all from all over the country, former chiefs, current chiefs, big departments, small departments, you name it. Guys from Los Angeles. One of them was a commander back during the OJ trial, and he was the guy who was in charge of all those detectives who had all those problems. So he was able to talk when we were talking about, what do you do in certain situations. He had a lot of firsthand knowledge. A lot of these guys have written books and developed different techniques, and it's great to go and have the opportunity to experience that, and then come back and put those new things to work here. And like I said, it doesn't matter whether it's a big place or a small place. Everything's relevant, and we've been able to do that, and I know the sergeants have attended some real quality trainings. The other thing we've done is brought in, the chief used the phrase previously, single point of failure, when pointing out we had positions prior to his arrival that we had either one officer or no officer to handle. So now we cross over in situations like firearms training. Myself and Sergeant Tedstone are firearms instructor for the department. Sergeant Nolte attended a patrol rifle armorer's course and is able to maintain and take care of the patrol rifles, something that's very important. He came back and went through them and found some problems. So again, it's not only helping us right at the moment, but it's helping down the road with. We don't have to worry about problems, we don't have to worry about lawsuits, and we don't want to worry about lawsuits. We've also had to adapt, as we've always done in this job. Things change, the laws change, procedures change, what's going on in the world changes. We had to react to make some changes with, unfortunately, the school shootings that have taken place. We have to train and constantly think about what's going on in that area, as well as, the chief mentioned earlier, the marathon situation. Training's changed on that level as well. Sergeant Tedstone's looking now into attending some training for active shooter instructor. So we can train more of our own people and not rely on others. And by working with the way the chiefs approached regional training, we're able to work with some of these other towns, and we can use their instructors that we don't have, and they can use us if they don't have particular instructors. So definitely been a big increase in training, and we hope to see it continue. You know, I don't want to see us always having to foot the bill for it, but we don't mind pitching in a little bit here and there. So pass it on to the sergeant.
Lieutenant covered most of what I was going to say. The FBI leader training was huge. It was a way for us to kind of improve and supplement our supervisor and our leadership training we got from very great instructors. As he mentioned, I'm hopefully going in June down to Georgia to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center for a 40-hour instructor class on active shooting response. One of the other officers will be coming with me, hopefully. We've yet to secure the second spot, but I think we'll be able to get both spots secured. It's a great training. I went down there and I attended a 2-week computer evidence response class, I think 3 years ago now. And we got a whole host of resources from them. We got computers, we got software, we got hardware. I think it was like a $20,000 package that the federal government gives you, but you need to get down there yourself. You need to pay for your airfare, you need to pay for rental, you need to pay for food outside the base. When you're living on the base, it's covered. Food's covered, it's base food, it's base housing, which was interesting.
Remind you of the Marine Corps did it?
A little.
Yes.
But the training's free.
But the training is free and it's great. So it's like, we said, same thing, it's a no-brainer. If you can take advantage of it and you're selected, then jump on it. So hopefully the next step in this training will be the June active shooter instructor program that we're looking forward to going to, and then coming back, and like the Lieutenant said, if we get a call at the regional school, we're going to be working in conjunction with Dover, and who says that we don't need to be there every time they do a drill? Well, we do show up when they have drills. We work with them closely. We communicate often about town-related things, school-related things. So from a training standpoint, it'll be nice to be an instructor on that and be able to not just go over there and kind of leech off them, if you will. Like, yes, we walk through the school with them and they have something set up. It'll be nice for us to have some input and to be able to take a leadership role and say, okay, well, this is how I was trained and this is what I think on this particular situation, and maybe work together to come up with the best plan for the response. And then obviously other schools, it's not just specific to schools, it's anytime there's an active shooter, if there's someone running around a neighborhood, if there's someone running around an office, if there's someone in a home. It's a specialized response that we typically don't respond to, and to be able to get that specialized training is very important, because as we all know from current events, crazy people are doing crazy things all the time, and there's no way to predict it. And if we can get a better response out of us, then we're happy to take it.
Right?
Just real quick, as a new supervisor, the FBI leader was extremely valuable to me. The variety of clientele that attends these trainings, some of these individuals have worked, as the lieutenant said, all over the country with hundreds and hundreds of people, hundreds of years of experience. So coming in as a supervisor for only 6 months and hearing some of their stories and experiences, it's greatly helped me to adapt that and to implement that in the town of Sherborn. So it's been extremely valuable attending these trainings.
Super. That's great. Appreciate you sharing all that.
Yeah, and for doing it too.
Yeah. Yeah, you're away from home.
So, and I actually wanted to touch on one of the other training opportunities I think that we're going to attend in the next month or so. Paul had touched on or asked last year about school safety, and you touched upon this ALICE program. I did have the opportunity to go to a presentation actually by the founder of ALICE that the Sudbury Police Department had initiated about 2 months ago. Still a little hesitant to support ALICE 100%, particularly in the elementary school setting for a lot of professional reasons. But I do plan on sending one or two of these guys to the ALICE instructor program. So at the very least, we have a better education on what it is, and then we can adapt to how we're going to handle things. I've included Stephen Bliss in this conversation. I've emailed him about it. He's not entirely sold on the ALICE program. So ultimately, it's going to be his decision with input from myself and Chief McGowan from Dover. So moving forward, we're actively keeping an open dialogue about school safety. And as you're all well aware, we do now have a security system set up at Pine Hill, which our desk officer is watching 24 hours a day. So we're definitely making strides in Sherborn to provide the best safety for our students.
Excellent. All right, back to that Middlesex
Sure.
agreement. We don't have a copy of the agreement, so we'll put it on the next agenda.
Okay.
And in the meantime, we'll have the paperwork so that we can look at it closely.
And I know
think
we
have
saw a copy of that 3 months ago when it was.
Yeah,
come before us.
It's there somewhere.
3 months ago, but,
I'll find it.
I don't have it now.
What you do, David?
No, we printed whatever you sent us tonight.
I know.
And it's,
So.
I'll resend
It's all right. I'm very supportive of this at this stage. I think it makes good sense for us, so, we'll see the words that we have to sign on to.
I'll get it off.
Again, that's been vetted presumably by every lawyer that.
Yeah, there have been
Stuff, yeah.
half a dozen municipal attorneys that have
Yep.
reviewed this. Actually, when you were out, Paul, and I was reading the original letter, one of the attorneys that represents Arlington used to work for the Attorney General's office, so she's pretty well versed in.
Yeah, I've gone through the papers that you have given us to look at today and that package of stuff the town administrator gave us, and there's policies and there's partial contract language, but the critical question is, what's the term of the agreement? Does it expire on a certain date? And how does one terminate the agreement? None of that was covered in any of the papers, not even a narrative description of what that provision says. So I'm hopeful that when we do get a contract to look at, there's language in there. It is entirely conceivable, even though it may have been looked at by a lot of lawyers, that that's an oversight, that there should be, because the authorizing statute doesn't allow for agreements that go on for eternity. And the town, all of the towns, should have the right to opt out of an agreement once they get into it. So if it's not there, it ought to be added.
If for nothing else, because there might be a new agreement that's better or different that they want to get into.
Yeah.
And one other question, you talked about it as sort of as a hot pursuit kind of thing, which all makes a lot of sense, but I'm just looking at the policy part of it. It also looks like if Framingham wanted to, an on-duty officer could come into Sherborn, sit on Western Avenue with his radar gun, start pulling people over and ticketing them?
No.
Well, it says they can, I forget what it is, they can provide, but it basically looked like what they could do is they could, if they're on duty in their town, they could come into any other town to perform police duties, right? The services, it's only if they see something in progress, is that what it is?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, excuse me, there would be no chief that would
Well,
agree
I think that would
to.
be a concern to the
Yeah.
people in the town. I mean, that
Yeah,
would
you'd
Looking
want
it
to
up,
know.
9 right
Well,
tickets.
you go over there, you go over someplace and we'd be making more money, so maybe it is a good idea.
Yeah. The issue with that LeBlanc case, though, is, that's been a tough one.
Case,
It's
yeah.
been a tough one for us for years, because what they're saying is you can't make a stop over the town line for a civil motor vehicle infraction. If you had a clear arrestable offense, like a hot pursuit, then that's a different story. But what we deal with a lot of times here in town is somebody calls and says, yeah, the car in front of me is driving fast or driving slow, whatever the case may be. It's not quite an arrestable offense. By the time we get there, they may be crossing over the town line. The chances of another officer being right at the town line is pretty rare. So for us to be able to make that stop, very often we get these calls from people, and they're frustrated. They're dealing with this person in front of them, behind them. By the time we get to them, catch up, we're approaching the town line, and now the best advice we can give them is call Holliston, call Natick. They call Holliston, by the time Holliston gets in on them, it's called Milford. And it's a frustrating thing for the person who's making that call, and it's frustrating for us because you're just losing them at the town line over technicality.
Right.
Court case.
And frankly, from our experience, and been doing this for a long time, believe it or not, people that are aggressive drivers typically, have some criminal record. That's more typical than not, so.
So that stuff that I saw in Dukes of Hazzard where they rush to the town line and drive across the border and then give the police
I
department...
was gonna use that as an analogy, Paul, but I didn't think anybody knew what Dukes Hazard was. Roscoe Pico train.
He's dating.
We slide over the hood every time we get
He liked to watch Daisy May, that's really what, whatever.
Yeah, you don't know where it is.
Yeah. Elliot, yes, sir.
You're talking about Middlesex County on this. There are 3 towns that border Sherborn that are in Norfolk County. So are they gonna be included in this, or?
Not yet, no.
So we can't go across the bridge to Dover
We can, but there's a certain protocol to be followed.
or through South Natick into Wellesley, which is also.
So Elliot, if you're on the lam from the Sherborn Police, don't go north. Go south.
If you got a minute, years ago, someone I know did a no-no on Oak Street in Natick. The Natick cop took off after him. You go down Oak Street, a mile and a half, you get into Wayland. Now you get out on Route 30 and you head east, you come back into Natick. When he came back into Natick, on came the blue lights, and the Natick cops stopped him after he chased him around through Wayland.
Been there, done that, huh?
Right, and
That's good.
the officer probably got written up by his
It wasn't me.
supervisor
It
to
wasn't
leave the
me.
town,
Yeah.
so.
Well, thank you all, gentlemen,
Thank
for
you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
sitting through this, sharing, and hearing our things.
Thank
Diane,
you, Diane.
All in
Diane.
favor? Diane, nothing else?
Just
Aye.
adjourned.
Just
We're adjourned, thanks very much.
Diane wants to
Thanks,
stay.
guys, for
Diane,
sticking
you
it
want to
out.
stay?
You can't follow these Met Bill.
Yeah. Call the chief over there.
Is
Call
that
the
right?
chief.
Well, by the way.